Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Council and Committee meeting here for May 21st, 2019. I'd like to remind everyone that our meetings are web streamed and televised. And for those in attendance, I would ask that you ensure that your communication devices are silenced. And moving on to disclosure of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? I see none from the... I do have one that I wish to declare on. It's an in-camera item 11D, and it's with respect to 11D. I have a family member that's employed with Health and Social Services, and I will not be participating with respect to that item. We'll be calling on Councillor Geisens. Approval of changes to the agenda. I do wish to make one note. On page 176 of the agenda package, it's staff report 19-31. The date in that recommendation is 2018. It should read 2019. So when we come to that, that will be corrected by the clerk. Can I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as presented? Councillor Rabbits and Councillor Taylor. Now, I thought there was some consent items that wanted to be changed around from what I heard. Madam Clerk, should we do that now? Okay. Councillor Michelle, you can remain seated.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to have the consent items, staff reports A, staff report B, pulled for discussion, please.
Consent items A, B, and I understand C has been pulled as well. Councillor Van Passen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pull C.
Okay, so all consent items A, B, and C are moved down to the first staff reports under number 5. Okay, any others? Any other changes? No? Okay. So I need a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as amended. Councillor Huffman and Councillor Martin is the seconder. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And so we will start with the consent, which was consent item number 1, and that's the Norview Lodge 2019 to 2020, it should read. Quality Improvement Plan for Health Care Organizations. Okay, we're just waiting on Ms. Miranda. Hobby, while we're waiting for Ms. Miranda, we'll move down to the Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan, Staff Report PW 19-30. Mr. Michael Simoes is here. There he is on the left. So we'll start with that report on page 23, Michael.
Thanks for allowing me to talk to about this tonight. The main purpose of this report is to present Council with the Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan for your approval. Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plans are legislated by the Ontario Electricity Act, and they're also an important resource for the county to improve local and corporate sustainability. So our current plan, which is the 2014 to 2019 plan, expires in July, and we are legislated to update the plan by July 1st. The proposed plan has been created with the guidance through the Energy Conservation Committee, and the draft you see before you was approved by the committee in April of this year. There is quite a bit of information in the plan, so I think I'll just stop there and answer any specific questions that you might have.
Questions for Michael? Don't see any questions. Yes, Councilor Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michael, I guess I'm just asking the consultation on this item was prepared by the Energy Conservation Committee, and I'm not able to find, can you tell me, just generally speaking, without naming people, who sits on that committee? Like, are there representatives? How many councilors? How many people?
Yes, through the chair, Councillor Van Passen is our council liaison on the committee. There are also staff members, and obviously a number of staff members, and there is one general public member on the committee. And in the plan, if you do want the specifics, there we have outlined the names of the individuals that sit on the committee currently.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, if I can ask my second question. Michael, and this is just a question that I have had from members of the public in general, but on page 8 of the report, and that's page 33 in our council agenda package, it describes the staff energy conservation competition. Could you explain how that works?
Yes, through the chair. So the Corporation of Norfolk County, this is a corporate energy conservation competition. So we challenge staff internally to conserve energy within their county facilities. And then we track what the historical energy consumption was during that specific month that we hold the competition, and compare that with the competition month. And essentially, the facility which houses the greatest decrease in energy during that month is declared a winner, and it promotes conservation throughout. And looking at ourselves and looking at our workspaces to promote that energy conservation throughout the corporation.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So it's a competition, but there is no like real incentive or reward for being the winner. Is that right?
Through the chair, there are some, not financial incentives, but generally we'll do an ice cream sundae or something of that sort for the winning facility. So it's just a low cost competition.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, I have one more thing I just
Sure.
want to mention.
Go ahead, Councilor Michelle.
Michael, and just a question about the chart that's on page 7 of the report, refers to the number of properties that are public libraries. Do we not have 5 public libraries?
Through the chair, that's a good observation. So what is not included is the Port Dover Library in that figure, because we do not pay the utilities at that facility. So these are the summary of energy of county energy assets. So anything that we directly consume the energy at those facilities.
Okay. Thank you. And I guess, Mr. Chair, I do have one more. I just noticed this one now. That's all right.
Well,
It's maybe just a comment and.
keep
and
going.
Michael,
Keep going, Councilor Michelle.
Okay, thank you. I realize that, this is a report about a particular topic, but I just happened to notice that there are 2 places in the report that say these ambitious goals and objectives that we are pursuing in this, with this energy vision are going to further validate Norfolk's reputation as being an environmentally and fiscally responsible municipality. And I'm just asking this and throwing this out there, and I'm just wondering where we got the reputation as a fiscally responsible municipality. I think I've just been sort of listening to some commentary lately that maybe that we don't have such a reputation, and it might be a way to correct that.
I see Councilor Van Passen had his hand up. Perhaps he would like the challenge of answering that question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sit on this committee. I've attended a couple meetings, and we've got a lot of knowledgeable people sitting around that table, and we are doing our best to conserve energy any way, shape, form we can, but we also look at it that there's an economic benefit to Norfolk County itself. And I can use the street lighting as an example, that we spent, correct me, roughly $500,000 replacing street lights, but it's a 2.5-year payback, and after that, we will be saving money. So we're looking at it from both ends, that we're conserving energy, we're also saving money, but it sometimes takes investment to get those savings. So I think that's sort of where I look at it as a fiscally responsible. We're not just doing it for the sake of doing it, we're doing it so that it's going to make it better for our taxpayers down the road.
Thank you, Councillor Van Passen. Thank you,
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
finished? Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Michael. I noticed on page 14 of the report, 39 of the agenda, there's the Norfolk County energy use breakdown. Similarly, on the next page over, 16 or 41 of the agenda, the greenhouse gas emission breakdown. Our long-term care facility represents a relatively high chunk of the pie chart. Would that be normal? A normal statistic, considering we only have the one major facility, or is that because the facility is not efficient?
Through the chair, to Councillor Martin, it is a large long-term care facility. I mean, in terms of just one, you're correct, but it is, in terms of square footage, it's a very large long-term care facility in comparison to the rest of our facilities, and that's kind of driving that percentage that you're seeing.
Okay.
Thank you. One more question, Mr. Chair. Let me find my page here. There were comments about page 49 of the agenda, interior LED retrofits. There are a lot of county facilities listed off there, including Talbot, Annalise, Simcoe Rec Center. Is it, forgive me because I just don't know, is it the county's position that it is still worthwhile to make investments in these retrofits in those pieces of infrastructure when we're kind of in limbo with how we're moving forward?
Through the chair, that's a very good question. In terms of interior LED retrofits, the payback is quite short, especially for those types of facilities which have long or high annual hours. So in terms of the arenas, I mean, you're looking at a 2 to 3 year payback for those types of retrofits. In that case, it may make sense. Obviously, as more information is available on the future, I guess, of those facilities, that's when we would make that determination at that time.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else with questions with respect to this report? No? Okay. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation as printed. Councillor Rabbits is the mover. The seconder is? Seconder. Councillor Martin for the following recommendation. Oops. The staff report PW 19-30, the Corporation of Norfolk County Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan 2019 to 2024 be received as information, and that council approve the Corporation of Norfolk County Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan 2019 to 2024 is presented, and further that staff be directed to provide annual reports to council on the plan implementation results commencing in 2020. Any further discussion? Those in favor? That's carried, Madam Clerk. And I see Ms. Miranda's here, so we will now go back to her report on Norview Lodge. This is the Quality Improvement Plan. Ms. Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if there's any questions. This report is really just to advise Council of the annual requirements of the submission of the QIP, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Councilor Michelli?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Miranda, I just have some questions about how the numbers on the quality improvement plans were arrived at. On page 13 of our agenda package, it's item number 2. It asks about the percentage of residents responding positively to a question what number would you use to rate how well the staff listened to you? And then we have a percentage in the current performance. I'm not clear about how we arrive at a percentage when people are giving a number for their response.
So through the chair, my understanding of this particular indicator is that there's a survey that's completed, so it would be over the number of residents questioned in the survey, and then they would, once they get the number, they would calculate that out accordingly. These numbers are typically done through as a group with long-term care homes. They're pre-established and validated, and I know that the administrator, Mr. Nolan, sits with the Advantage Group, and collectively they come up with these different measures, so they're fairly consistent across the region, and with those numbers they are validated through that tool, and that's how they come up with those numbers.
Thank you, Ms. Miranda, Mr. Chair. And I just happened to notice that the current performance in 2019 is well below the targeted rate for that question, which there's an explanation of that, and I understand that. But then that leads me to this question. In item number 3, it asks about the percentage of residents who responded positively to the question, would you recommend this nursing home to others? And the performance rating is very high, which obviously is a very good thing, at over 92%. It just seems to me that those two items very much contradict each other. And I'm just wondering if there's some way to sort of sort that out or explain it.
So through the chair, I will apologize. I can't articulate that specifically, but I will find out for you, and I'll circulate an email to all council with that explanation, if that's okay.
Thank you, Ms. Miranda. And I guess I just have one other thing, Mr. Chair. At the bottom of that same page, our agenda package 14, in the comments section, the second sentence at the bottom right of that page says, many residents come into long-term care with a less than positive atmosphere in the beginning. I'm not sure, is there a possible, just a bad word choice there? Should atmosphere be attitude, or is there something I'm missing about an atmosphere that they bring?
So through the chair to Councillor Michelli, I'm actually not the author of the report, so I would suggest that it is. I do know that when residents first come into the home, there is an adjustment period. There's often the residents do come with some form of dementia, and they do take time to adjust, and there's a lot of time and effort spent with new residents to have them adjust to their new environment.
And so, Ms. Miranda, one more, Mr. Chair. So would you suggest then that this is true of, it says many residents, are we talking about like most, or, half? That's the problem I have is how many is many?
So through the chair, I would suggest that it would be more than half. Many of our residents, a high percentage, do come in with some form of dementia, and it is a huge adjustment period for them.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody with further questions on that? If not, I need a mover and a seconder for this recommendation as printed on page 6 of the agenda package. Councillor Rabbits is the mover. Seconder, Councillor Geisens is the seconder. That staff report HSS 19-24, Norview Lodge 2019 to 2020, Quality Improvement Plan for Ontario Healthcare Organizations be received as information, and that the Committee of Management be advised the 2019 to 2020 Quality Improvement Plan for Ontario Healthcare Organizations has been uploaded for submission to the HNHB Lynn, and further that Council direct the Mayor to sign the Quality Improvement Plan narrative for healthcare organizations in Ontario on behalf of Council. Councillor Hoffman?
Can I just make an addition to that? Councilor Michelli and I were just discussing the fact that in the future when these reports come again, is that it would be beneficial to have the author of the report, and Bill Nolan should probably be in attendance next time. to answer those questions.
Okay.
If we can make note of that.
I don't think we need that recommendation, but let's.
No, but I just
let's,
want to make sure it's not lost.
Get the
Okay.
county CAO to note that.
Okay.
So that there's direction that way. Okay, good. Okay, I read the recommendation. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And our last item here, former consent item that we've moved into a report, is the Lynn Valley Trail Association license agreement renewal. And who's doing that one? Mr. Cridlin.
Through the Chair to County Council. Yeah, Lynn Valley Trail Association license agreement renewal is just that. Norfolk County and the previous municipalities have had a great working relationship with the Lynn Valley Trail Association, dating back almost 3 decades now. So as a trend going forward, we try to get longer leases and agreements. So what staff are asking for now is an additional for 10 years and an additional 10-year on top of that when we get to that point. There is $1 a year fee tied to each agreement. And I talked to Councillor Van Passen today, and this was polled. He is correct. In the agreement, there is no, I'll call it out clause for lack of better words. The trail was put in originally as a utility corridor from Simcoe to Port Dover. I know the Trail Association knows that, and county staff know that. And I don't think there was ever a misunderstanding that if a water main or something was to go down that we would be allowed to put our infrastructure in and the trail to go back on top. But with that said, I think Councillor Van Passen brings up a good point. This is still a draft agreement. We could throw language in, giving a 30 days notice for disruption of the trail or something like that for infrastructure. I don't see that as a problem. And I think we can add that and pass this next week if that's council's decision to go with that. And with that, I'll turn over to County Council for any questions they may have.
Councillor Van Passen, did you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was, I did speak with Mr. Cridlin this morning. I couldn't find an out clause, and the original intent of the purchase of that many years ago was if we need a water sewer line between Simcoe and Dover, we have that utility corridor. And, as years go by, people might forget the original intent of that, and it would be good to have that clause in there just to remind sort of the next generation coming on that, we might have to borrow it for a year while we dig it up and put a water line underneath it, and then you can have it back when we're done kind of thing. So a little extra clause in there would be helpful in my mind.
So, Mayor Chop, have you got something here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Councillor Van Passen. In fact, I spoke with our CAO about this morning. I think it's important for us to have an out clause in the agreement if necessary, especially if we're looking at this kind of timeline. The other question I had, Bill, was I'm just kind of wondering if you could touch on more the whole of the association. Like there's 89,000 from the levy that goes into main. What exactly does the association do? Like I see that they're applying for some grants.
Through the Chair to County Council. The association is, their biggest thing is applying for grant money for infrastructure such as the bridges that Norfolk County, a lot of these grants, Norfolk County doesn't have the ability to qualify. So these groups can go out and I believe Trillium has given money before and different associations like that. So they are able to do it and they are able to bring this money to the table, which Norfolk County residents do not have to pay to keep the infrastructure together. They are also big promoters of the trail. And as well as they do some maintenance, however it is minimal, and that's where county staff still have to go out and cut grass on the trails and things, but this association is very good at, garbage pickups, organizing things like that, and working with staff.
And just one more question on that end. And do I read this correctly? They pay for the insurance? Where do they get the money to do that?
Through the Chair to County Council. I think they do have to supply insurance for their activities and to be the leasee. And where they get their money from, I'm not exactly sure, Mayor Chop. I just know that they are responsible for it and they have their own coverage and they do pay their premiums. Best I can do with that.
Okay, thank you.
I saw that the gentleman that's part of this organization was shaking his head yes, that they do have insurance coverage. So, okay, great. I just spoke to the clerk, and she has a suggestion. I'm going to ask her to repeat what she told me.
Through the chair and to committee, this is simply a recommendation to you, but what you could propose is a deferral to the May 28th council meeting to allow staff time to draft up specific wording on an opt-out clause.
Okay. Councilor Van Passen.
I would move that.
So it's moved by Councilor Van Passen, seconded by Mayor Chop, that we defer this item to the full council of May 28th. Okay. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And now we'll move to the original first staff report, and it's S Land Development Corporation Property Tax Increment Grant on page 83.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you,
Hosmer.
Mr. Chair. I'm here to present this report. Thank you very much for that opportunity. Back in January, the proponents of the grant request came to council. Subsequently, staff did receive an application for the tax increment grant, and we met with them in March. Subsequently to that, this report was prepared. We reviewed the tax increment grant program and outlined it here in the report for you in great detail. And also working with finance department staff, also estimated the potential dollar amount that would be granted to the organization or the property owner if the grant was approved, which is around $507,000 over 5 years. So basically, we provided some legal implications around changing the policy in regard to that. I think probably the biggest obstacle currently is that the policy was established for existing structures, and at this point the land is vacant. So that's the one basic part of the grant program that conflicts with the proponent's proposal. So that's the one obstacle. The second one being is at this point, since we don't have a reappraisal of the property, we can't really enter into a site-specific agreement, which is the normal process that you would do once the development is built. So at this point, we're here to answer questions of council and hopefully make a decision so this developer can have a clear understanding of how to move forward.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Hoskins, I guess I just want to challenge you a little bit on the original intention. I looked back up the DCS report 07, I think the first one, was it from 2015? It was actually included with the deputation when they presented last January, and in fact, at that time, the intention, I believe, was for the rehabilitation of buildings and lands, was it not?
So through the chair to Mayor Chop, the policy that this is based upon was amended back in July of 2018. So at that time, it was confirmed that it was just the basically buildings that are being renovated or renovated are eligible for the program.
That may be that it was changed in 2018. I did see those changes, but the original intention of the policy in 2015 when it was created was that it was lands and buildings.
I don't have the policy in front of me, but I'll take your word for it.
I guess I just want to challenge a little bit on, there was a statement on page 86. It says, the optics of granting a for-profit venture hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax relief while cutting the budget of other services is not good. I'm just kind of wondering where that comes from. There is no impact, and I'll come to this with James on the levy here. We would not be getting this money if the land isn't developed. If it continues to sit there for the next 10 years undeveloped, then we don't see anything in Norfolk County other than the current tax rate that there is on the property. And even with the tax incentive grant, we only apply that to that portion that's above that existing value, correct?
That's true. That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions? Councilor Rabbits.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, likely I'll direct my comments towards Clark. I am also in the same sort of vein of thought as our mayor, that the intent of the policy is really what prompted my support of having the grant approved. And I do see making use of land very much the same type of project as infill, whether we're repurposing a building or we're making use of vacant land. At the end of the day, we're going to have a development take place, and this is going to bring new revenue streams onto the books for us here in Norfolk County, and that's a good thing that we do want to promote. One of the issues I take with in the report, it's on page 86, page 4 of 7 of DCS 19-47. It says that the policy was developed to establish equity among applicants. Circumventing the policy or changing the eligibility requirements of the program will establish precedents that could trigger applications for other land developments that do not meet policy criteria. And when we're having the meeting, when we did approve this last, I do recollect making mention that, in fact, it could be precedent setting. You know, this was the Queensway's opportunity. We could possibly be looking at redeveloping brownfields in the downtown core, for example. And my intention was, you know, if we're going to approve this development up on the Queensway, there could be other applicants coming forward down the road that would want to repurpose a vacant brownfield in our downtown. Again, this is infill, whether there's infrastructure or buildings that would be repurposed. We could actually start seeing a change in trend and start having fewer vacant lots or buildings by incentivizing businesses to develop those properties. I think what I'm struggling with is now we've approved the grant. Now we're reading backwards and saying, well, it doesn't fit the specific criteria of having a building, but it does fit with the original intent of the policy in terms of redeveloping a brownfield. And then when we look at our options that are in the conclusion of the report, and I'm now flipping to page 88, it's 6 of 7 of DCS 19-47. We've got a couple options here. One is to refuse the application as, you know, not meeting the current purpose of it for renovating or refurbishing an existing building, or overrule the policy and contravene the existing policy and proceed as we had originally intended. And I guess I'm looking for a potential option 3. I was surprised that in there we didn't see a drive towards recognizing this site as a brownfield. Because now that we're this far down the road, I feel like the original conversation should have been taking place. You don't meet the criteria. It shouldn't come before council for the specific policy, but guess what? You are redeveloping a brownfield, and we're talking about $300,000 or close to in development charges being waived, as opposed to the 507 as tax write-offs through this existing policy. And I almost wonder if that's not the best alternative to be moving forward with for this particular application. But I'd really like to hear maybe some commentary back if I'm missing something, if we don't have possibly a third option, or if this is all the information that we have before us to make this decision. I took issue with having the grant transferable, because my intention was to have the property developed, right? And not sell the idea of developing a property and have someone else build the structure and incrementally pay the taxes. You know, I wanted to see the project come to fruition, not someone get the grant at Bain and then sell the idea of a development to someone else and let them build it, so to speak, and they will come. So I'd still like to drive towards that outcome of getting the development built, and I don't see it happening with definitely the first recommendation in the conclusion here. So I'd like to provide you an opportunity. I know I've chatted for a fair amount of time, and there's a couple bullet points you'd like to touch on. I just want to provide you an opportunity to respond to some of my commentary and see if there isn't a middle ground that we could perhaps arrive at.
Sure.
Some comments?
Yeah, through the
Mr.
chair to Councillor Rabbits. The one last point you made about a grant being made available to get the development underway, I guess the issue is they don't get it ahead of time, right? They get it after the fact when it's built. And all of the community improvement plan incentives are basically, you're allowed to transfer ownership, because that happens in properties, right? It happens all the time, and it may take a while for a development to actually get built. The other part of this one being it's basically a retail condo type development, meaning that the eventual tenants of all these various retail properties will be owners of the overall condo development. So it's important to factor that into the discussion. On the matter of brownfields, from what I can understand is we in our policies we mention brownfields, but it's not like we've designated, there isn't like a designated status of brownfields somewhere. So in the case of this property, I think in order to qualify, for example, for the exemption to development charges, which is another $361,000 on page 86 that is available to this developer on top of the CIP amount, if the property is considered brownfield, then that would be something they could also access, right? So I think it would be advantageous to clarify from council's perspective, if we're calling it a brownfield, great. I think I'm leaning back on the issue of an existing building renovation, and our policy, which was amended through the official plan back last year, said that we needed to apply it to existing buildings. And I think the reason being, and ultimately you're the boss, so you tell us what you want to do. The idea around that is to prioritize, because if everything is up for grabs in terms of tax increment, then there's a lot of things out there that could be eligible. So we needed to prioritize somehow, and renovating existing buildings was a way of doing that. I think, sorry.
Okay, Councilor Rabbit, did you?
Also saw Pam Dusling wanted to add her perspective, and I want to provide her an opportunity to do so. Please, Pam.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Through the chair, it's Councillor Rabbits. Just to add to what Mr. Hoskin has said, the lands, to my knowledge, are not having any remediation done in terms of environmental cleanup. We do know that there has been, over the years, some dumping on those lands, but they're not designated a brownfield, if you may. The builder is intending to do slab on grade, so the soils won't be disturbed. And in addition to that, the zoning is remaining what it is, so it's not going to more sensitive land use, so then there's no requirements to do environmental cleanup on that property. So just that information to assist you in your discussion.
Okay. Councilor Rabbits, I'll let you finish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate those comments, Pam. I understand that there's peat moss in the ground, and the developer has done some study in terms of identifying at what sediment layer that peat moss exists. In terms of footings, there's been some, for the parking, for the drainage, I believe some preliminary, not a full class EA, but some studies have taken place, and I believe the individual has planned for not disturbing that layer. And I would, I interpret that as meaning this is not maybe zoned a brownfield, but there's remedial concerns with the site. And I want to encourage, if there is remedial issues with a site, that we're encouraging it to be developed rather than us assuming those remediation costs. And I'm looking just across the way at the police station where we're investing millions of dollars to remediate a site that's very similar and very close to our wellhead. But I wanted to draw attention to the transference that, we do have the policy DCS-07. It's in our agenda, page 101. So what I'm looking at now, it deals with the transference. Approved grants are not transferable to any other property, but may be transferred to a new owner. We've touched on that. Of an approved property, provided the new owner meets and agrees to the terms and conditions of the grant. So I understand that that's written into DCS-07. I'm struggling right now with either of the two conclusions, and I want to provide maybe an opportunity for the rest of my colleagues here on council, and I see our mayor is eager to enter into the debate with her comments, and I want to maybe put it back out to the floor. I've kind of expressed my reservations, and I don't think I can articulate them any clearer, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Chop?
Just, I wanted to touch first on Councillor Rabbit's concerns with the transferability, because I think that was a concern that we all had at the time, because there were allegations that had come forward that this was being used as sort of an incentive to sell the property undeveloped, when in fact that's not the case. And the advantage of the transferability in this piece, and I think Clark just said it, these are condo units. So in fact, in terms of a brownfield development charge waiver, that would go directly in the hands of the developer. Versus in this case with the transferability to somebody that is buying, it's encouraging somebody with a store to come here to buy a unit in the building, and they are the ones that are paying the taxes to Norfolk County, so they would be the ones reaping the benefit. So there would be no benefit at all in the case of a tax incentive grant until the construction is actually completed. No final construction, no grant. Versus a brownfield development exemption charge, they could start and we still don't ever necessarily get the project finished in that case. So I think that's an important point. The other piece that I just wanted to touch on, I did pull the minutes from council on January the 30th, and I just wanted to read the resolution was that council accept the grant proposal as presented on page 11 of January 22nd, 2019, council in committee agenda package, and that county staff be directed to work with the deputation respecting the property tax increment grant that is non-transferable and report back to council. So whatever happens today, I actually believe, in my view, that this is going to require a supermajority vote in this case, because I see this as council actually having already approved the grant as it was presented back in January. I guess I have a couple more points to make, but I'll let everybody else speak first.
Other, Councilor Van Pass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to approve a grant like this every week if we could, because with the property sitting vacant, we collect nothing. If they build something on it and start paying taxes, we're calling it a grant, but we're really just giving them back a little bit of that tax money. And at the end of 5 years, we get to keep all of it. And there's even, like over 5 years, they're going to pay $338,000 more in taxes than what our, grant is. And I know we call it a grant, and the treasurer and I could probably have some great debate on money that's going in and out. We have to track it, but they pay it in and we give some of it back. So it's not that we're taking money from other taxpayers and bonusing somebody. All we're doing is giving some of the money back that they've just paid to do something that's going to make the county better and make the county money down the road. So this option is much better than the grant for the development charges thing, because that's actually real money that we have to give them. This is just new money that goes in and out, and we track it as a grant. So, and I think the mayor is right, we already proved it. We need a little clarification on whether it's transferable. I think we have that. It is transferable to property owners, but not transferable to different properties. So whether we even need to discuss this, I think it's already been approved.
Further questions, comments? Mayor Chop again.
I agree with everything Councillor Van Passen just said. I just wanted one question while we're at it to Mr. Johnson. I'm just concerned. What I don't understand is, and like Councillor Van Passen just said, I know there's ways that obviously we need to track money in and out, but I just don't understand why the approved 2019 levy-supported operating budget included almost $50,000 to provide the property tax increment grant program. Because although I understand it's a way to track, we aren't paying anything out, so there shouldn't be a cost to the taxpayer because we're getting additional money coming in. So why do we have a $50,000 hit on the levy for this program?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Madam Mayor. So when we do our budget deliberations, we get a growth percentage. So this year is 1.99%, and that growth includes these types of properties. So we're calculating those extra revenues into our budget process, and there's no way to strip it out. So in order to counter that revenue with the tax incentive program, then we have to offset it, as Councillor Van Passen sort of mentioned, money going in, money going out, with a budget line item in order to offset that growth that we would incur with that kind of development.
I'm just wondering, perhaps this is to you, Mr. Schlang, in the future, if I mean, maybe we shouldn't be factoring so much growth in at the end of the year then, if we're not actually going to realize it, because right now the property is just sitting there. So to say we have properties that may or may not cost us $50,000, it would be better for us to realize that benefit the following year than it would in that current year to overestimate the potential growth that we're going to experience and then have to apply that to the levy after the fact. It just, I think it'd be better to be straight up about it from the beginning.
Yes, Mr. Hosking.
I just wanted to clarify, too, that the $49,000 in this year's budget for tax increment relates to 2 clients who receive tax increment rebates that are on the books. So they are actual clients who are being paid back. So those were established a few years ago, and those 2 clients are making their way through the system. So we budget for them every year so that we make sure we don't not budget for them.
You're chopping, eh?
But even then, it shouldn't be something that ever goes on the levy. It shouldn't be a cost to the taxpayer, because the taxpayer right now is assuming the benefit of, I don't know whatever, if it's $100,000 a year they're paying right now, or let's say $10,000 a year on that property. They're not getting anything without any of these properties being done. So the tax increment grant is only being paid, the person, I distinctly recall Mr. Barrett saying this, they pay all their taxes to Norfolk County, and then they get reimbursed for that particular amount that is over and above the previous or the current taxes on that property. So there should never be a levy impact to the Norfolk County taxpayer. And to that end, I just also want to comment, it's written in the report about this being a tax write-off. I don't believe that that's the appropriate terminology either. This isn't a tax write-off. This is a tax increment grant. A tax write-off is something that would be through the government, the federal government.
Okay. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to council. Should we be looking at allowing staff the opportunity to further amend this particular policy, as clearly there's a lot of support for this around the table, and it says in the report that this policy or this application doesn't meet the policy criteria. I'm just wondering if I could get some comments from fellow councillors.
Comments with respect to Councillor Taylor's suggestion. Madam Mayor.
I think that our staff and Mr. Schlang probably have a lot on the go right now to add another piece onto the pile. I think that if we have others that come forward with a deputation to council for something that's project specific, then like Councillor Van Passen said, we can look at it. And if we seem to be getting inundated at that point, hopefully we'll catch up on some of the other stuff, and then we can look to changing the policy down the road. But I think right now everybody's probably swamped enough.
And
one more.
I was wondering if, through you, Mr. Chair, if the county clerk could please make a comment on the supermajority that was spoken about earlier. Is that going to be the case for any vote on this?
Through the chair to committee, a reconsideration only occurs at council, so if that was the route to go, committee could, no, actually, it's best to go to council, and then our procedural bylaw says accordingly, but you could potentially hear, you have to go through a notice of motion to reconsider, but you could do a supermajority to waive those rules and potentially hear it next week at council. But again, that is what the decision comes out of committee. So if committee tonight is to approve this application, then I don't believe a reconsideration is required.
There's another hand up here. Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I think in order to keep the business moving along tonight, we've had a good debate about this policy in general and about this application. We know our recourse for a future council meeting and the procedure. I'd like to move that we receive DCS 19-47 as information and leave it at that.
Madam Mayor.
I think I'm actually going to, sorry, Councillor Rabbits, going to agree with Councillor Van Passen. We shouldn't be doing anything. Council's already made the motion, and it's already been approved on January the 30th, which is really option 2. So if somebody wants to move for a reconsideration, they would need to do so.
Okay, need a motion then. Your motion is to receive it as information, Councillor Rabbits? Okay, that's what the clerk's suggesting. Counselor Taylor, you're the seconder? Okay. Counselor Rabbits is the mover. Counselor Taylor is the seconder. So with that report, DCS 19-47, Land Development Corporation application for property tax increment grant be received as information. Those in favor? Those opposed? The vote's been taken. I'd just like to make my comment about this. In January, when we dealt with this, I was not in support of this move, not only because of the $500 and some thousand that would be forgiven, and potential development charges of $361,250, but because we've always been speaking about downtown Simcoe viability. And if we put 30 retail stores, condos on the Queensway, it's going to further devastate the downtown businesses. That's my comments. Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir. I would just, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to touch on that. So we did not approve the development charge exemption for the brownfield development, so we're clear. So we're only talking about the increment grant today that is over and above the amount that we are getting on property taxes.
I do understand that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we will move on. And it is Staff Report 1918, Financial Services, Tax Policies. We have, you may give the report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Each year, municipalities have to set tax policies which form the basis of the final tax
Can you
levy.
move the microphone a little closer to you?
Sure.
Hard to hear. Yeah.
The purpose of the report before you is to set the tax policies in 2019, which will then be used to set the final tax rates. The intention is that the decisions Council makes today will be included in a tax policy bylaw in the May 28th Council agenda. Issues such as tax ratios, capping and clawback, and annual installment dates are regularly included in these reports. At the request of Council, some information regarding business vacancy programs in Norfolk County to date has also been provided. Periodically, the Ministry of Finance introduces new optional programs or incentives that require a decision of Council. As indicated in the report, for 2019, there are options related to a special tax class for small-scale farm business and to phasing out vacant or excess property tax reductions for business. Because this is the first time this Council has had to establish these policies, I attempted to provide as much information as possible, and as a result, the report is quite lengthy. However, if Council has questions or would like to discuss any of the topics included in the report, I would be happy to answer your questions.
Questions for Sue? Councilor Rabbits.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Sue. Thank you, Sue, for your detailed report. I've been waiting for some time to hear back about vacant lots and their tax rates in the Central Business District, and I'm very keen and interested to hear about what that looks like here in Simcoe. I know that in the past, a vacant lot had some taxes forgiven, and I'm not too sure if this is the report, if I'm still waiting for that information to come to light, because I was under the impression that that program was going to come to cessation and not continue. And I was actually interested in potentially increasing the taxes on those vacant lots in order to encourage development, in order to encourage occupancy, and to get some of these blights, specifically with the Central Business District, dealt with. I think we need to do a better job of marketing those vacant lots in our downtown, and I was very interested in seeing what taxes are being forgiven on those vacant lots, specifically in the Central Business District. Is that information contained explicitly within this report, or am I to expect another report on those vacant lots in the Central Business District?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to you to Councillor Rabbits. You are quite correct, sir, that the vacancy rebate program has been phased out, 2019 being the last year that applications will be processed. So all the applications related to 2018 were submitted by the end of February, and those rebates have been paid. I think maybe there's some confusion as to vacant commercial versus vacant lots. There aren't very many vacant lots in downtown Simcoe, but there are vacant properties, buildings. Okay, so the difference being, and I do touch on it there, that there is a reduction in the tax rates for vacant or excess land. I can think of one instance in Delhi of where a commercial property burnt or was torn down and now there's just grass. So that would be vacant commercial. Excess land is land, say around a factory that is the front lawn. So it's excess. It's not used for the business per se, but it's excess, just like it says. So the program has stopped for future. There'll be no more applications next year. So they were always a year lag. The applications processed this year were for last year. And what that essentially did, the property was taxed as commercial full and the owner paid their taxes. But if it turned out that the property wasn't occupied for 90 plus days, or a portion of the property wasn't occupied, they could apply for a rebate that was equal to 33% reduction, or equal to the same rate as the vacant or excess land rate.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to follow up, so I have a clause on page 121 of our agenda. It's FS 19-18, and it says, and further that Norfolk County continue to apply a municipal tax rate reduction of 33% to commercial industrial properties in vacant or excess prescribed tax classes. So am I to understand that this is just finishing off 2019, the program's going to come to a cessation, and that this clause is just sort of a housekeeping measure? Or is this clause bringing that relief back into the fold?
Through the chair to Councillor Ravitz, sorry for the confusion, and maybe I wasn't clearly identifying. There's two separate vacancy things. So the vacancy rebate program has run its course. We still have tax classes for properties that are always vacant, always excess. Okay, so the vacancy rebate program was for property that was taxed as if it was occupied, and then later found out it wasn't occupied. They could apply for a rebate. What that recommendation is asking for is just the status quo. So there aren't very many properties in the county that are vacant land or excess land, except for, as I said, I know of one in Delhi that's downtown, and it's a vacant piece of, and it's grass. Or there's factories that have excess land around them. So what this is essentially saying is, right now they get a break of 33%, and the recommendation is to continue that unless council decides otherwise. Okay?
Okay, Councilor Rabbit? Saw another hand up. No? Okay. So, we have this report before us. There's no more Councilor Van Passen, go ahead. you're moving it from 0.25 to 0.22? There's discussion here. I saw Councilor Michelle first, then the mayor. Okay.
Thank you,
Councilor
Mr. Chair. I was also going to second it. I just also wanted to make a comment about the Ontario Federation of Agriculture was here in January, as Councillor Van Passen mentioned, and they suggested, although I do believe they actually requested at that time, that we bring this ratio down to 23. And I think today, bringing it down to 22 will go some distance in confirming the fact that council is listening to our farmers, sort of also maybe in light of the number of people who attended our meeting last week. I think that it would be very helpful in general for that community to know that we are listening. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Rabbit?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you to our mover, Councillor Van Passen, I'd like to ask for a friendly amendment, not regarding the farm tax class ratios. I think that is fair, and you have my support. It would be the clause I was referring to earlier. It's on page 121, and further that Norfolk County continue to apply municipal tax rate reduction of 33% to commercial industrial properties in a vacant or excess prescribed tax class. I'd like that paragraph to be removed in its entirety. We've heard from our finance team that it is status quo, that we've been forgiving someone that has excess parcel of land that is essentially their veranda, their front of their property. We are talking about commercial industrial spaces. They're not someone's front yard, their side yard. These are businesses, and I don't see a sense in leaving money on the books or money on the table for someone because they have a nice plot of land and they don't want to dispossess themselves of it. I was hoping that you'd be amenable to removing that clause in its entirety. If not, we can proceed forward with the motion that you've presented to us.
Councilor Van Passen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I looked at that as well because there's a school of thought that gives incentive to landowners to not change the status quo because they're getting a break on the taxes. And by taking that away, it gives them more incentive to do something with it. But I don't think that's the case in Norfolk County. I think that any business that has property that's vacant, it's because of economic reasons other than that, or the lack of staff that they can't find the workers they need. And I think I think the Treasury Department has explained it's not used all that much, and I think there's legitimate reasons why it's being used in very isolated cases. So, you know, if you wanted to make an amendment, but I don't think I'd support it as a friendly amendment, and I'm sure that we will look at it again next year. If the economy starts turning around like we hope it will, then I think all those little cases will be off the books and our businesses will be moving forward. So, but I'd hate to penalize somebody who's in a position, not penalize, but take away a certain benefit that is not of their own doing, and we're giving them a bit of a break on it. So.
I'm going to ask the clerk for her interpretation.
Through the chair to committee, I would recommend not, that this would not be an amendment. It is different from the intent of the main motion. So I would keep it together as is. That's, again, though, my recommendation, and committee can go forward if they oppose that.
Okay. Further questions? Mr. Johnson, I've got one for you. What does this actually do? Bringing it from 0.25 to 0.22, what does this actually do?
Thank you, Mr.
For the
Chair.
other properties, I guess.
So what that does, so when we pass the tax levy during budget deliberations, everybody has their share of the pie. And if we've reduced someone's share, it's like a balloon. Those total taxes still need to be paid, and it's whatever their respective burden is. So what we are doing with this exercise, if we go down to 0.22 as a ratio, we're reducing the burden for the farmland to pay for the tax levy. Now, as a result, if we decide to go to the ratio of 22%, then that is a $656,000 reduction in what the farmland owners have to pay. And the way that's distributed is the lion's share goes to the residential, which is about $554,000, and then the multi-res and the commercial and so on and so forth with the chart on page 115, you can see that it's distributed accordingly. And what that does to the residential tax rate for the median household, at council deliberations, we had a 3.1% increase for the median household, and with this change, that'll bring that up to 3.8%.
So it impacts it by 0.7%. Okay. On the average household valued at 230.
Through the chair, 233,250.
Anything further? No? So, I did have a mover and a seconder. Councilor Van Passen made the motion as printed on page 120 and 121. Mayor Chop seconded it, right? Yeah, with an amendment. Okay. So I will read it. That report, FS 19-18, 2019 tax policies be received as information, and that the 2019 tax ratios be set at multi-residential 1.6929, commercial 1.6929, industrial 1.6929, pipeline 1.4894, farmland 0.22, managed forest 0.2500. And further, that Norfolk County adopts the optional subclasses for small-scale on-farm business for commercial and industrial subclasses. And further, that the municipal tax rate reduction be set at 75% for the prescribed tax subclasses for small-scale on-farm business in 2018 and future tax years. And further, that Norfolk County continue to apply a municipal tax rate reduction of 33% to commercial and industrial properties in vacant or excess prescribed tax classes. And further, that is 2018 marked the year that all business class properties reached current value assessment. Norfolk County formally exits the capping and clawback program immediately. And further, that the 2019 final tax levy be due and payable in 2 installments on August 30th, 2019 and October 31st, 2019. And further, that a 2019 tax policy bylaw be passed to give effect to the above. And further, that the resulting 2019 tax rates resulting from the above tax policy decisions form as scheduled to the 2019 tax policy bylaw. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I just get the number from Mr. Johnson on the 0.23, which is what the farm group was asking for to begin with? What that would convert to?
Through the chair to Madam Mayor, if we went to 0.23, then the farmland class would be reduced by 436,000. The residential land class would be increased by 368,000, and I won't list the rest, they're minor in comparison, and then that would result in a 3.5% increase for the median household.
Madam Mayor.
I guess, and then the next thing I'm wondering, when we looked at all of those charts to begin with, you know, for me, our industrial taxes are quite low, are they not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Madam Mayor, in comparison to other municipalities, our industrial ratio is lower. Some of them are over 2%, whereas ours is 1.69.
So do you know what Haldeman's would be as an example?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Haldeman is 2.3274.
2.3274, and we're at 1.9, you said?
1.6929.
1.69. So I guess here's my problem. We are an agricultural community, and I understand the farmers come. I get their perspective on things. I also understand the perspective of our residents, and we've just done things like, you know, agree to continue to waive the development charges for industrial land as an incentive to come here. When I look at in some type of industrial project that's up and running, that has been able to get up and running by us waiving development charges and encouraging that development. For me, that big split between, the industrial of what we're charging and the industrial in our neighboring county in Haldeman, would it not be possible, as opposed to increasing the burden on our residents, of perhaps maybe bringing that industrial piece more in line?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Madam Mayor. So that's a good question, because we've asked the same thing. And the province has what they term as a range of fairness. And with that range of fairness for commercial and industrial, the ratio is 0.6 to 1.1. So we're already outside of that range of fairness. So we can reduce that ratio, but we cannot increase it.
So you're saying that the residential ratio in Haldeman is just that much higher?
Through you to Mr. Chair, to Madam Mayor. So this is as a result of, I believe, the Mike Harris days back in 2000, I believe, when we had some tax reform back then. And any municipality that had their industrial ratio at that point, they couldn't increase it, but they could decrease it to get to the range of fairness. So in Haldeman's case, they had they just happened to have a higher industrial or commercial ratio, whereas Norfolk County had a lower one. So that range of fairness is for all municipalities across Ontario, and you're allowed to go towards the range of fairness, but you're not allowed to move away from it.
Sorry, and that range of fairness again is between residential and industrial, commercial and industrial?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Madam Mayor. So the range of fairness for residential is just 1%. We can't do any sort of other ratios for residential. For multi-res, we could go to 1.1%, but we're at 1.6929. Commercial and industrial, that range of fairness is 0.6 to 1.1, and we're at 1.6929. So there's different range of fairnesses per property class.
Sorry, Mr. Johnson, I guess I'm just not sharp enough here right now. That is the range from what to what, though? From what to the industrial? From the residential range? Where's the start and end of the range of fairness?
So that if we didn't have any ratios or anything like that, everybody would just be paying 100% of whatever the tax rate is. So, or whatever whatever it works out to be. So what the ratios do is it skews those tax rates to pay a little bit more for commercial or industrial, or pay a little bit less, for example, with the farmland. So the residential ratio, or the tax rate, is just a straight 1.0, which is the ratio. So the industrial and commercial range of fairness, you could either go 0.6 of that. So if we really wanted to give the industrial tax class a great deal, we can bring them down all the way to 0.6, and they'd only have to pay 60% of the taxes. However, because we have the current tax ratio of 1.6929, they pay about 1.7 or 70% more taxes than the residents do. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that properly, but in other words, commercial industrial do pay a little bit more taxes than the residents do, and unfortunately, because of the range of fairness, we can't increase that because of the provincial legislation, but we can reduce it if we want to.
Okay, I see the county CEO had his microphone on. So.
Through you, Chair, I'm just concerned again that, such an important thing like adjusting the industrial, I'm not sure if the mayor's thinking of proposing a solution, but this is where the employers are here to employ people. I'm just a little nervous if you're thinking of adjusting the industrial to a higher rate to offset the farming. I think we should recess on that and really understand the implications.
Well, I think I would be happy to recess on it as well, to defer it. I mean, I know you guys want to get going on it, but I support both views here. I support the farmers wanting to see a little bit more equity coming their way, but I also know that we worked pretty hard to keep our residential tax rate down for our constituents. And so I also don't want to see it go on. Commercial property, when you speak to business owners in downtown Simcoe, they are already facing, a heavy tax burden here, I think. So, but when I look at industrial, that's where I'm just wondering if there wouldn't be something that we could do in that area. But again, I won't propose anything now, but maybe if we could defer it.
Yeah. Through you, Chair, and I've said this before, I'm not sure the finance team was aware that this motion was coming, but I mean, I think we got to do some more due diligence on what that would happen to potential employers or of industrial lands.
If I can just add, specifically to the industrial ratio, it's set at 1.6929. Legislation prevents us from increasing that. So whether we recess it or not, it's not within the range of fairness per the Municipal Act. We can lower it, but we can't, my understanding is we can't increase it.
That makes it clearer, Chair.
Okay. Anything further? No? Yes, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair Columbus. I think that addressing something like this on the fly like this, we should certainly look at this come budget time so that when we adjust the farm ratio, we know what that residential rate is going to be set at. Increasing that median residential household burden to the 3.8 is a pretty hefty, considering, as the mayor said, how hard we did work to bring that down to the 3.1. At this point, just given the timing, I don't think I can support it at this time. But if we address something like this again come budget time, there's certainly a lot more potential.
Councillor Van Patten.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know why we keep going the wrong way around. What we have here is $1,099,000 of extra tax money coming off farmland that receives no services, no extra services that it did before. To keep it fair, we're saying, well, only half of that is increase in the taxes on the farmland should be shared among all the other groups out there because they get the benefit. We've had how many new houses built in the last 2, 3, 4 years? Every year we got 100 new houses. We shift 500,000 to the residential and we've built 100 new houses. Nobody pays any more taxes. Those new houses now pay those taxes. Every year council has the same discussion, and this is why they made these changes to tax policy back in the late 90s, early 2000s. We had municipalities who would charge 10 and 12 times a higher rate on the commercial and industrial because commercial and industrial can't vote. If you keep the residential taxes artificially low, those are the people that vote for me and I get to keep my cushy job. And that's why the government stepped in and said, no, we're going to set a set of standard ratios. The residential ratio is always the standard. That is one. And then there's a range of fairness on all the other categories so that all municipalities got to play in that same range and be fair to everyone. We've talked about, I have been here twice over the last 8 years, 10 years, making the same sort of argument that the farmland keeps paying a bigger share of its pie, and every year there's less and less of it. The residential, every year there's more and more of it, and they get to get double dipping and pay less. And how is that fair? We've talked a lot around this council chamber in the last 4 months, 5 months about a matter of fairness. So the farm ratios should be coming down. They should have come down gradually every year by 1 point, but now we got to make a little bit of a leap. We're trying to split the difference on it, and I don't see any reason to defer any sort of motion that is to discuss the bigger picture when the two are not really connected. So, there's a motion moved and seconded. I hope that we could just vote on that and see where it.
We're still speaking to the motion, so Councillor Huffman.
Thank you, Chair Columbus. Through you to Councillor Van Patten. If I remember correctly, when we discussed this earlier, so in January, there was also some discussion about if we're looking to keep things fair, that farms, we were looking at a kind of an income-based piece too. That was a discussion. So if you have someone who has just a small bit of land and is only making X number of dollars, they're not paying the same rate as someone who is a multi-million-dollar corporation. And if I recall, afterwards, many of the farmers were in favor of this.
Okay, I'll let you have one more crack at it,
Well,
Councilor
if
Van
I
Patten.
could repeat what I said in January, if we're going to base it on farm income at $4.25 corn, $8 beans, the ginseng down less than half of what it was, we're going to be handing out rebates rather than collecting taxes. So, that's a pretty far-flung thing, and that's, again, a bigger discussion for another day at the provincial level if they want to sort of gear the tax policy based on potential income or actual income, because I'd be happy to send, my income tax form and see what I could get out of the deal too. But that's not a discussion for this level of government, I don't believe.
Mayor Chop?
I'm just wondering yourself, Councillor Columbus, rather than afterwards, being from, one of the big agricultural sides of the county here, if you might have an opinion, you might be able to enlighten us with.
On which?
On this.
On this, well, we've been hearing for a long time the fact that farmland, that the farmers would like that reduced. You've heard that. So I guess at this table you're doing it, but I can say that because it would raise our taxes this year from 3.1 to 3.8. That's pretty significant. And when it comes to budget time, that's where council is going to have the struggle, because you have to make that money up somehow off the residential. That's where the struggle will be, because that's the one that the tax department uses as the benchmark for our percentages. That's the way I see it. That's where the struggle will be. Councillor Geisens, you've been there many years with me.
Yes. I have to agree with what Councillor Van Passen is saying. Theoretically, what we're doing is we're taking money out of the farmer to get to whether it's in industrial or where we are. And to me, I think right now it's not doing the greatest in the agricultural area, that's for sure. The prices are down. And I don't know if you've had to listen to what's happening with some of the canola and all of that is not going to go to China like before, so they may even lose more. So theoretically, I would agree with what Councillor Van Passen had put forward, and I am voting in favor of that. I'm not a farmer anymore, it's rented out, but I think that is something that we can keep going, and they have come many, many times to look at that, and we have done it and changed it sometimes, but now is a good time to do it. If we need to, I would suggest that we leave it, or not leave it what it is, but what Councillor Van Passen has brought forward. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Chop.
Just wondering if Councillor Van Passen might be willing to amend that to the farm tax rate that was requested by the farmers, and not something beyond that, just so that the burden is shared between both groups as opposed to.
I'd be happy
thinking
to move
about
it down to the
0.23?
0.2%, like rather than 22, if that helps you out any.
Well, I was looking at the 0.23 was what they had requested.
Is that a friendly amendment? Councillor Van Passen?
Well, we'll go back to this issue of fairness. We're adding $550,000 on a $70 million bill as opposed to $550,000 on a $5 million bill. What used to be $4 million is now $5 million, is going to be $6 million, and it's still going to the same farmers. The residential portion increases every year. There's more and more houses every year. The piece of the pie is still smaller than it used to be last year, the year before that. The piece of the pie for the farmland is more than it was last year, the year before. If you want to move it to 20%, that would just about get it to the right ratios where it used to be when they did the last reassessment. By going with the 22, I was splitting the difference on it.
Mayor Chop.
I see where Councillor Van Passen is coming from. I guess the point is, though, we went through budget deliberations. Our residents are expecting a certain amount. So to now go and a couple months later to come at a change that was what was reported, I think there is an opportunity to do more with this next year. I think that if we have a 0.65 advantage over Haldeman in our industrial tax rate. Why aren't we booming with industrial activity? I would argue that Haldeman likely has more industrial activity than we do here. So there's something that is amiss in these ratios. But like Mr. Schlang and Mr. Johnson said, we're not going to fix it today. So maybe for this year, it's coming up with some sort of happy medium and moving forward next year to be able to more properly address the situation as a whole with the farms.
Well, maybe that happy medium, like every one of these farmers are already paying 65% more taxes because of the increases. So, and we're arguing now over whether it's, 0.3% on a residential as opposed to a 65% increase in the tax bill for farmland, and we're nitpicking on whether that's fair. I think we're on the wrong side of the fence then.
Okay. Something I wanted to mention too, that Councilor Van Passen, I believe this is correct. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have land that you're paying 25% taxes on land, you can deduct those taxes against your farm income, can you not? I've always done it, so I'm just wondering why.
It only works if you have income to deduct it from. When you're in a negative balance, it doesn't really help any.
Okay. But you can deduct it, right? And part of your house as an office. Okay. Anything further? Mayor Chop again.
So I'm assuming
The clerk has warned me that I'm
assuming
letting people speak too often, but...
Councillor Van Passen's not taking the .23, but I know I was the seconder on that. I'll support it at the .23, so I'll leave that decision up to him.
So you're supporting it at .23, so... Okay, but the .22 is on the floor right now. Councillor Michele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to suggest the same thing as the mayor. If Councillor Van Passen would take maybe as a friendly amendment to move this to .23. He was already kind of splitting the difference. Maybe we can split the difference a bit further and solve this issue of whether or not we defer this until the future or try to get this done today. Maybe .23 was also the request by the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. I don't think they can complain if we give them what they asked for. Thank you.
Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I just saw that James Johnson did raise his hand, and I thought it was, I'd like to provide an opportunity to weigh in if this is a good time. If not, we can continue with the debate.
Okay, I'm going to call on Mr. Johnson.
I was simply going to suggest that we've heard from the Agricultural Committee. What we haven't heard from is from MPAC on perhaps an explanation on current value assessment. Years ago, MPAC went to all the properties on water, and they've really raised their assessments. And then there was another time where MPAC went to all vacant residential land, and they really increased those assessments as well. We didn't adjust any ratios for them because it's based on current value assessment. It's not based on number of homes or number of properties. It's based on the value of their properties. I'm not an assessor. I don't work for MPAC, so I can't do it justice to explain it. But as far as ratios are concerned, they've been there since the inception of Norfolk County, and therefore the fairness, for one thing, the system that MPAC uses is not fair to everybody. I think we're fooling ourselves if it is. However, as far as fairness goes, it goes by the current value assessment, which means what is the value of your land? Now, if the value of the farmland is not what MPAC is saying, then that's a whole other issue. But that's how they split the pie. It's based on how much your property costs.
One last shot, Councillor Van Passen.
I would just like to ask the clerk if I could amend my motion to the .23 and that we call the vote on it, and, because I don't want to take up everybody's time the whole day.
Long as the seconder's okay with that.
I think she is.
Okay. So, I did read the recommendation as it was printed. However, the farmland bit goes from 0.25 to 0.23. Is there any last, Councilor Michele?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if we could find out now from Mr. Johnson what that would do to the residential tax rate.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Michele. So on page 115 of your agenda, if we go to farm tax ratio of 0.23, then you're looking at a reduction in taxes the farmland pays of $436,000. It increases the residential tax class of $368,000, or 3.5% for your median household, rather than 3.1, which we passed.
3 point, which was that? 3.5. So 0.4, yep. Okay. We're going to get this done soon. Do I have to read it again or anything? No? Everybody understand it? No more questions? Call the vote. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to the next report, it's the 2018 Capital Status Report from Financial Services. Ms. Bugner? No, Ms. LaPont.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully I'll be a little shorter for this report. The report before Council is an annual report that we present. We generally do it before the financial statements because there's a number of recommendations contained within the report that affects our year end, and so that we can finalize our year end. So the report deals with the status of the capital projects. Some projects as of December 31st, 2018. So the capital plan that you approved for 2019 is not included in this listing. So the projects, some projects will remain open because they haven't been completed. Some projects will be closed, recommended for closure because they're finalized. Some will be closing, but they're over budget. So staff has provided a recommendation on how to fund the over expenditures. That's included in the attachment. Now, I hope this time the attachment is a little easier for Council to read. The last year's attachment was quite small, and you needed a magnifying glass to read everything, so hopefully this helps. We are working to try and improve on the report. Just as a note on the page 2 in the table, one of the items to note is we're recommending canceling projects that we have savings of $4.3 million. They came in under budget. And that's offset slightly by some projects that are over budget by 1.2 for an overall net savings of approximately 3.1 million. And that means we'll either have some savings in some grant funding that we can use for other projects, or we'll relieve some of the stress that has been on some of our reserves and reserve funds. The other thing just to note, which can vary from year to year, but we have been our capital plan has been reducing. I believe in 2015, our capital plan for the year was 100 outstanding projects, amounted to $163 million of projects we were working on. Now we reduced that to about approximately 141. So I think we're going in the right direction, but that can change with one large project for sure, but we can always set those aside. The rate projects are the projects that they represent approximately 55% of the total budgeted expenditures and 45% for the levy supported. And with that, I'll close, and if Council has any questions regarding the report or specific projects. We don't have every project manager here tonight, but the general managers and other managers are here that can answer any questions, hopefully for specific projects.
Thank you. We go to questions. Councilor Martin first, then Van Pass.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Kathy, this report was wonderful. it was really helpful to give perspective to where these projects are at and what we're slated to pay and save on these projects. I specifically would like to draw attention to item 41, St. Andrew Street, Chapman to McNabb, Port Dover Road reconstruction. Since I was elected, I have been having ongoing regular conversations about this road with our public works staff. I actually have some pictures I'd like to pass around to my colleagues. My apologies for not having copies made, but the clerk can have that afterwards. Clerk's office. This road has been deferred several times.
What's the number?
41, Mr. Chair.
41?
Yep. This road has been deferred many times. It was either 2012 or 2013 that the road in its entirety in Port Dover was reconstructed, and a small patch of a couple blocks was left and was not fixed. So these pictures that I'm circulating are potholes that are 20 centimeters deep and regularly patched by our public works staff, which is great. But these residents are looking to have this road fixed. They're looking for dialogue as to why it was not fixed initially when the rest of the road was done. I see here in this report that it says that it proceeded to consultant for engineering selection. In the meantime, council deferred construction phase of the project to 2022. My question to staff is, how do we bump this project up? It doesn't make sense to me why it would continuously be deferred without some type of information coming forward to council. And I would love to be able to report back to the residents of St. Andrew Street.
Okay, I do not think that Kathy has the answer, but Mr. Godby here might.
Through the chair to Councillor Martin. It's a very complicated question that you ask. There's a million different reasons that projects could be shifted one way or another. This specific project, I personally at this point right today cannot give you an answer as to exactly what drove that process. Sometimes it just comes down to competing priorities. Sometimes it comes in the sense of we have 10 roads that need to be rebuilt, but we only want to spend the money for 8, so that will cause projects to be delayed. We'll run into situations where something that we were not expecting to have to do right away has crept up with a significant issue that needs immediately to be addressed. So there's various reasons that way. What I will do is tell you right now, I can follow up with our staff to get the history on this specific job and be able to sit down and have a better dialogue with you about that. And for the rest of council, that does apply for any of the other projects within Public Works reign there, that if you just identify to me the specific project number, I will gladly look into that for you.
Okay, so you don't have all the answers today, but you'll follow it up. That's great. Councillor Huffman.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, may I just...
Okay, Councillor Martin.
Thank you.
Martin again.
Thank you, Mr. Godby, for that answer. If I can shed some light on it, there's a slope issue and a drainage issue on that road, and I have had ongoing conversations with Mr. Baird about that. So that would be great. I would greatly appreciate some type of follow-up dialogue to share with the residents, and that is one very large stretch of road that runs from the top to the bottom, essentially, of Port Dover, and just a few small blocks of that road were neglected. The rest of the road work was finished and completed. Thanks.
Councillor Huffman.
Thank you, Chairman Columbus. Through you to Councillor Martins. Actually, I thought maybe that picture looks like my street. But I think it all depends on different pieces, like you said, with slope and things like that. And it is interesting to know which ones, do get bumped and why, and the public like to know that, right? Like my street is, not my personally, but someone saying their street is really bad, and then why another one seems to get done. So that is very helpful. And actually, the report was very good too, because I just had an email about, and if anyone's listening, I can answer this question for them. The resurfacing, the asphalt resurfacing of Thompson Road East will be delayed until 2021 because there's an RFP for the construction at Cockshut and Thompson that will be occurring. So that answers anyone's questions about that.
Councillor Van Passen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to draw your attention to item number 21, the Porter Bridge in Marburg from 2010. Now, I remember the discussions from that time, how the engineer just refused to design a single-lane bridge, and he wanted to put a double-lane bridge there, and then we had to widen the road, we had to purchase more property. We have that one from 2010. We got Big Creek Bridge Concession A by Port Rowan from 2013. Maybe once we get Bridge 45 done, we can see how that works, and we can get a couple of these off our books, because sitting on the books for 9 years with nothing done is not acceptable in my mind. So hopefully we can do something with them in 2020.
Okay. Further questions? Councillor Geisens.
Well, I've been getting just about the same thing that other people have. There's in at Cortland in Lada at the what's the name of the Elizabeth Street? It's actually it was a what was it a subdivision, I guess, that was put up. Oh God, I don't know how many years and everything like that. But the road with potholes like this, and actually part of the road is actually grinded up to back to I guess gravel. I have probably 30 or 40 complaining constantly, when are you going to fix the potholes? So theoretically we're going to have problems. I guess that's the only thing we're going to be able to do. Of all of these that are here, how many I haven't had a chance to look at it and to see what will be fixed. But certainly I'm getting fried as well, just as the rest of you will.
I think we're all getting pothole calls. I sent 2 in this morning to Public Works, PW Customer Service. They responded already, and that's the key. That way it's documented, and you can come back and say, look, 2 years ago I asked for these potholes to be filled. So, any comment on that, Mr. Godby? Okay. Further? Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question to Kathy on item 51, sidewalk and walkway reconstruction completed. Recommendation to close project. It doesn't have a location per se. Are there additional ongoing sidewalk, walkway reconstruction projects? I would hope there are. There's certainly one for Port Dover that I know of.
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, Jason Godby may be able to help out too. The sidewalk program is an annual program, and generally staff plan which sidewalks they're going to be replacing and any new sidewalks. I'm not sure the reason why it was a little less this year than what they've been normally spending, but definitely there is an annual program for sidewalks, and specifically, I believe there's a couple of projects that are identifiable just for like newer sidewalks.
Okay. Go ahead.
A few more, Mr. Chair. Item 77 is the Port Dover Water Treatment Plant expansion. That is still open. I'm just wondering if we can have some type of briefing brought forward to council where that project stands, where we plan to move forward, just some type of report to keep council up to speed on that.
Do you want something verbal right now?
No, no.
No? Okay.
Just a note. Additionally, on number 117, roof repair, Talbot Gardens, the comment is waiting for a substantial rainfall. Just wondering if the last 2 weeks was substantial enough, and there might be an update on that as well.
117, roof
117.
repair, Talbot Gardens Arena.
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, I will follow up with our facilities staff and determine if that amount of rain we have had over the last couple of weeks has been good enough for them to figure it out.
Thank you.
Okay, can always run a hose over it. That's what the roofers do. Anything else? Councillor Huffman.
Thank you, Chair Columbus, through you too. To Mr. Godby, also looking at item number 61, I've received quite a bit of contact regarding this, and I see that it's still open, and it's looking in process of establishing a legal easement. Is there any kind of time frame on that?
Through the chair to Councillor Huffman, I will have to follow up with you on
Okay.
that one specifically, but I have noted it here and I will find out where it stands.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? I've got a couple here, and I think the mayor may have had a call about this one too. The washrooms, accessible washrooms at the Delhi Museum. Oh, okay, Councillor Huffman, you can answer that?
Yes, that is being addressed, actually. That was one of our items at the accessibility meeting today. And I believe that that's coming forward, not this week, next week, I believe. And there is a plan in place for that, so.
Okay, good, thanks. And Mr. Godby, the 47 and 48 item, Chrysler Street and Maple Avenue in Delhi. Where is that project at? The RFP is closed and under design for Chrysler and Maple.
To the chair, you can see that it is in design. I'll have to follow up to see where we're at. I honestly have not heard as to the status of that one at this point. So
The tenders have not been called for 2019 yet?
not as far as I'm aware.
Ooh, doesn't look like it might not get done. Goose Harbor water upgrade, we'll be getting information on that soon. Number 202, okay. And that's all I had. Nothing further? Okay. Mayor Chop.
I'm just wondering, there was a couple of notes there on the project, the bridges on concession A, and I just can't remember the other one off the top of my head, that I remember at one point had been recommended to be closed, and I'm just kind of hopeful, Jason, that maybe, I don't know, once we kind of figure out some, more cost-effective alternatives, that maybe we might be able to look at possibly, it's still going to cost a substantial amount of money to remove those bridges, to look at, perhaps replacing the one-lane structures there with a one-lane structure as well. I know those people on concession A would really like their bridge open again.
Mr. Gobby, any comment, quick comment?
Through the chair to Mayor Chop, that is something that we can have further discussions about for sure.
Thanks.
Okay, I need a mover and a seconder for the report printed on page 125 recommendation. Councillor Huffman and Councillor Rabbits as a seconder that report FS 1916, 2018 capital status report be received, and that the recommendations as set out in the schedule included with report FS 19-60 be approved. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We're going to take a short break because we have deputations at 5 o'clock. Okay. Clerk wanted a break.
I guess we can take it.
We could, it's up to them.
Oh.
Because we have staff waiting.
Pardon me? Yeah, we didn't know that. If councilors could please take their seats, we will reconvene. Ready to roll, folks. So we'll now hear from, with respect to report ECS 19-16, the fiber optic connectivity for municipal locations within Victoria, Port Dover, and Waterford. We have Mr. Brent Wallace with us to provide us with a review of this report. Mr. Wallace.
Through the chair. The following report is to request Council to authorize the single source supply of fiber optic connectivity with Execulink Telecom from municipal locations identified in Appendix A for Port Dover and Victoria. Fiber optic technology is the media of choice, being that it is scalable and reliable. Fiber optics is the recommended technology to be used for SCADA monitoring for water and wastewater locations that are legislated by Ministry of Environmental and Parks. In 2018, a capital program was approved by Council for the acquisition of fiber optics for the Port Dover and Waterford areas. The Norfolk IT Department already has a working relationship with Execulink Telecom for fiber optic connectivity from municipal locations within Langton, Port Rowan, and St. Williams. A single source supply with Port Dover and Victoria could provide staff with the opportunity to complete installation of dark fiber within Port Dover within this year. A follow-up report will be presented to Council for approval of all costs and the term of contract once staff have met with Executive Telecom and have completed negotiations for Port Dover and Victoria. The Waterford locations also identified in Appendix A would require a tender to be issued for any internet service provider to respond to. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Wallace? Mayor Chop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just a little bit curious. I guess, so we have a cost of $440,000 to install fiber to, I believe it's something like 22 locations. Some of them, I mean, I couldn't agree with more. The Port Dover wastewater treatment facility, the Port Dover water treatment facility. I believe you just mentioned SCADA in there, right? That's our monitoring program. Coming back to the Robert Walton report that detailed a number of savings for Norfolk County, I think it's just, we keep having, financial implications as hits on the levy, but yet we're not seeing a reduction from these, increases in technology and so on that we're actually laying money out for, whether that's in HR or whether that's here. And so Mr. Walton said at one point, as a result of municipalities in Norfolk County adopting SCADA, that weekend rounds, really aren't necessary anymore because the SCADA data needs only to be reviewed and confirmed every 72 hours. So, I keep hoping that when we see financial implications of saying something like, here's $500,000 that's going on the levy, that we're going to start seeing some sort of, reduction coming from this benefit that we're implementing.
Payback. Mr. Wallace.
Through the chair, the $400,000 is just a budget. It's a capital budget that was chosen in 2018 based on what we had looked at it for Port Rowan. And at that time, if we, as in the county itself, were to install fiber, we were estimating approximately $40,000 per location. That's approximate. So it's all in budget right now. Until we actually meet with Execulink and work out the actual costs and negotiate with them, I'm not expecting to be that for those locations. It's just a budget at this point in time, nothing more than that.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better. And then I did meet with Ian Stevens, and if I recall correctly, I actually tried to put a call into him earlier, but didn't manage to get a hold of him, that there was not a plan to run fiber up to Waterford yet. Is that correct?
Through the chair, My understanding is they have no plans to do Waterford at this point in time. That's my understanding, but again, I have not met with ExecuLink since July of last year, because I was waiting to kind of get this RFP or this procurement done of some fashion. So that is the reason why we're looking at having to issue a tender for Waterford to see who else may be available or interested in doing that.
If I, just one more thing, Mr.
Go
Chair.
ahead.
So I'm just wondering, I'm just kind of talking out loud here, but thinking out loud, I guess, rather. Mr. Stevens told me that when they ran the fiber to Port Rowan, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was sort of Norfolk County had kicked in some money to make that project feasible because we wanted to be able to have fiber at the water and waste plants down there. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct.
So I'm just wondering, when I see 440,000, and again, I appreciate that you're saying that's not the final number, to run it to 20 locations or 22 locations, I'm skeptical of the Waterford piece only because we don't have a fiber line even running up there right now. If it wouldn't make more sense to look at some potential sharing of running a line to Waterford with them, of seeing what that would take, as opposed to worrying at this stage, of running fiber to our community centers and so on, that if we could get a line, if we would be able to partner with them to be able to get a line to an area like Waterford, that would definitely benefit from having fiber. I just wonder if that wouldn't be more advantageous.
Through the chair, I can mention it to ExecuLink when we're meeting them with regard to Port Dover about Waterford again and have that discussion. I do talk with a number of internet service providers within the area, and I know that there is some interest in getting a connection to Waterford, maybe not necessarily by ExecuLink, but by other internet service providers. So I'm thinking we can find a plan to get that there at a reasonable rate, but again, until we get down that road, I can't answer that.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Wallace. You definitely made me feel better, though, that that's just an estimate right now. Thanks.
Councillor Michelli, then Huffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, and kind of just thinking out loud here, and I hope you'll indulge me. With regard to all of these questions about connectivity to Waterford, Port Dover, Victoria, and all this fiber network being discussed, there is a significant announcement going to be made tomorrow from the Southwest Integrated Fiber Technology Board, and I'm wondering if it might be wise to just defer this for a short period of time until that announcement is made. It could perhaps put all of this in a little bit of a different context. It's my suggestion.
Okay, are you suggesting a deferral, Councillor Michelle? Okay, Councillor
Same,
Huffman?
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair Columbus. Through you to Brian. I just want to make a point that as Councillor for Ward 7, Waterford would very much appreciate moving as quickly as possible in terms of any services that can be offered there. So, and like you said, whichever provider it be.
County CAO.
Through you, Chair, if I heard correctly, you're not going to commit to ExecuLink yet. You're going to come back to us with final numbers, and maybe that, at least we can work concurrently, Councillor, because if we always do things sequentially, we're never going to get anything done. So if we could come back to you before we commit, and maybe the announcement's there, if you would allow us to do that.
Okay, Councillor Michelli, do you understand?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Chief Administrative Officer is kind of thinking what I'm thinking, but I just wanted to make sure that that was clear to everybody, that I think we can come back to this and do things more efficiently when we do it together. Thank you.
Okay. Further? No? Okay, there is a recommendation. It's printed on page 149 and 150. Councillor Rabbits? Mover? Seconder? Councillor Martin? So it reads that report ECS 19-16, fiber optic connectivity to municipal locations within Victoria, Port Dover, Waterford be received as information, and that council permit a single source supply as outlined in Norfolk County Purchasing Policy ECS-02, section 4.8.4, with ExecuLink Telecom for fiber optic connectivity to municipal locations identified in Appendix A within Victoria and Port Dover, and further that the results of the single source negotiations be subject to council's approval in a future report. Does that cover it? Call the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Mr. Wallace, a question. Is there any other fiber company going into Waterford right now?
I don't really know, through the chair, I don't really know that for a fact. I understand, I have heard that there is some construction going on. I'm not sure who the vendor is. I know that there is some internet service providers very interested in that area, but I don't have that information ahead.
Well, maybe we should be checking that option out as well. It might be a cheaper way to go. Who knows? Anybody else? Comments? No? Okay, we're going to move to deputations. Our first deputation is from Mr. Russell Colebrook. It's with respect to creation of a Norfolk County Transportation Services Board. Mr. Colebrook, you can go to the podium and you have 10 minutes. I'll tell you when you have 1 minute left, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. I am Russell Colebrook. I live at 10 St. James Street in Renton. I'm a past long-time Norfolk County taxi driver, starting in 1975 and ending in April of 2018. When I first got into the business, it was regulated by the Haldeman-Norfolk Regional Police. That was the case for many years, and it worked pretty good. At some point, they just stopped oversight, and the industry became self-regulating. That lasted for several years. With the creation of Norfolk County came the bylaw department's entry into the game. They created bylaws, dictated terms for owners and drivers to follow, without consultation with those who are actually in the taxi business, with money, blood, sweat, and tears invested. I have long questioned the logic of this thinking. It would be akin to the county regulating the airline industry without input from stakeholders or pilots. Not so sure I'd want to fly those friendly skies. Unilateral, arbitrary decisions without a common frame of reference are problematic at best and a disservice to the industry at worst. And now, in the words of the late, great Tom Petty, let's get to the point. I believe the time has come for the creation of a Norfolk County Transportation Services Board. Since the county is involved as a regulator of the taxi industry and the promoter of Ride Norfolk bus service, the time is now for a unified approach to transportation in this county. The composition of this board should reflect the needs and the interests of all parties involved, an equal voice for all. This board should include mayor and/or councilors, county staff, taxi owners, drivers, Ride Norfolk personnel, and members of the general public who use these modes of transportation. It's time for the dictatorship to end and the partnership to begin. I respectfully ask council to consider this proposal. Thank you.
Okay, ready for questions? Questions to Mr. Colebrook. Councillor Hoffman.
Thank you, Chair Columbus. Hi, Russell. Couple questions. One, what are you describing as a dictatorship? I'm unclear.
The bylaw department?
You're describing our bylaw department as dictatorship?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
All
what
right.
they are. That's what they've done.
And are you aware that there is a transportation committee in Norfolk County?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, all right. And have you had any discussion, have you had a chance to have any discussion with anyone from Ride Norfolk?
Not in person yet.
Okay.
But I hope to meet with them soon concerning a bus stop in Renton.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for the deputation? Don't see any. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Colebrook, would you be able to articulate some of the changes that you would like to see through this creation? Are there efficiencies specifically you could put your finger on that would be beneficial?
Well, recently, there was problems in the taxi industry. And, that's a direct result of creative writing in the bylaw department without consultation to owners or operators. Like, we've got to get everybody on the same page. It's, that's all I can say to that.
Okay, Mayor Chop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Colbrook. Just further to Councillor Martin's point, is there a couple examples that you can give us of things that you would?
Well, the recent problems was to do with the bylaws concerning anybody with a record, and that kind of messed things up for quite some time. And a lot of companies had to cut back on the hours of operation because they don't have enough drivers to go behind the wheel, and people have been waiting super long times for cabs. But, I think if Ride Norfolk and the industry itself work together, we could improve things.
So would you be amenable, I guess part of the challenge we're having right now is, of some of the major, public works projects that have been, on the books for several years. I know everybody's tapped out in different departments with trying to address some of the stuff that is mounted. And I think there's a little bit, we have so many committees right now that we have a committee for everything, it seems. I believe the deputy clerk has come up with a possible solution, which at least in the interim, and I'm hoping you might be amenable to that, to be invited to meetings with the clerk's department to be able to share your input, as opposed to starting out right today and then creating a whole new committee. And then if we find that that's not working and you still want to see a committee down the road, but we certainly, appreciate all of the input that you've had. Clearly, you've demonstrated your commitment and running in the campaign and so on, and we want to hear your ideas and perspectives on things. And so would that be something that you would be amenable to, would be having some meetings with the clerk's department?
Oh, certainly. Got to start somewhere.
Okay, that would be perfect.
Okay, I have spoken with the clerk here because I knew there was something coming forward with respect to revamping taxi licensing. I think you alluded to it, Madam Mayor, so I'm going to ask the clerk to define exactly what's going to be happening in the near future.
Thank you through the chair to the deputation and to committee. On April 16th, committee passed the resolution to work on a business licensing review, which will include community consultations. So that's for all parts of our business license or business licensing bylaw, and that includes taxis. So what we are suggesting perhaps to do is to more of an informal process, but invite yourself, Mr. Holbrook, and perhaps Ride Norfolk and other taxi companies, if they so choose, to be a part of more of the specific discussions, but on a more informal basis. But we do want consultations with the people who are holding the licenses, and I think that this could potentially be a solution until we get to the bylaw before council in the fall.
Yeah, I agree with that absolutely. Like I say, you got to start somewhere, but nobody's talked to each other in a long time. It's time it happened.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Mr. Colbrook. Very good, thanks for staying on top of this. And mover and a seconder to receive the deputation, Councillor Huffman and Mayor Chop, seconder, that we receive the deputation of Mr. Russell Colbrook regarding Norfolk County Transportation Services Board. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Our next deputation is from Mr. John Harris regarding the Simcoe BIA bylaw. Mr. Harris, welcome. You have 10 minutes, sir, and I'll remind you at the 1 minute left mark.
Are we good? All right. So thank you, Chair. Thank you to Mayor Chop, Council. For many years, the Simcoe BIA has struggled. It has been plagued with poor oversight, governing board that has lacked vision and capacity. It has failed to have transparency and accountability to the ratepayers and to the stakeholders, and it's continuously failed to communicate with almost everyone. Last week's council meeting is a good example of the shortcomings, and you saw it personally. The vacancy rate in downtown Simcoe is still too high, and the fundamental issues that are in the way of growth continue to linger. Recently in the press, members of the previous council lamented the frustration with the BIA. Through their spokesperson, they laid the blame of the fate of the downtown on the previous councils. The irony on that is a little bit palpable. I happen to agree with them. They state that people wrongly blame the BIA for the fate of the downtown, and there I disagree. As I look around this table, and I see who sits here, I think Ward 5 clearly identified who they blamed for those issues, and I think the rest of the county spoke as well. The absence of many people is testament to that. In her inaugural address, Mayor Chop called on this council to have courage and the willingness to make bold decisions. She declared that there must be a willingness to change the culture of this organization. 6 months in, I believe that we're on the road to that change. Specifically in reference to the downtown, the conversation that was started last week in this chamber is a testament to the discussion that has been decades in the making. What does the accountability of a local board of this municipality that is funded by taxpayer money, what does that look like? And what is your role in oversight? At the moment, we're at an impasse. We need to have a board established, but it must be done so in a manner that is open, accountable, and transparent. If the BIA is to stay, and I think that it should, transparency and accountability must be brought into its governance structure. To that end, I would ask the following: that the bylaw establishing the Simcoe BIA be modernized. It does not seem at this moment to conform to the requirements that are identified under the Municipal Act. That this council do what previous councils failed to do and establish a clear understanding of the oversight roles and the responsibility of the county regarding the auditing of the BIA's financials and exercise oversight on how $250,000 of taxpayer money is spent. To the members that on this committee here, on the council that are appointed to the BIA, that you consider a governance review of the organization and a modernization of the transparency and accountability requirements. As a local board of the municipality, there should be regular communication to the council for oversight and transparency purposes. There should be a review that looks at what this looks like because we need to prevent a situation like this from ever happening again. If we are to find the efficiencies, if we are to deliver better services and tackle the issues and challenges that stand in the way of renewal and revitalization, it is imperative that we honestly assess the way that things have been done, challenge the status quo, and move to make the changes necessary to improve the outcomes that we desire. I do not envy the work that's in front of you. However, I do appreciate your willingness to listen to our communities and to act. It's a breath of fresh air, and I am sure that it will be instrumental in moving us forward. And with that, I'll take any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Would you be able to give a copy of your presentation to the clerk also before you leave? And she's coming to get it. Questions for Mr. Harris? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the deputation. So to be clear, you weren't coming here today with any exclamation, sorry. You weren't coming here today, although you said the deputation was to have council remove the bylaw. That is not at all what you were intending to do today.
If you look at my deputation, I wish to speak to the bylaw, and in specific, if the best course of action, in my personal opinion, is if you can get the modernization of the bylaw, if you can get clear transparency and accountability in the BIA organization, it can be an enormous powerhouse for this community. The problem has been, I do not feel that previous boards have had the capacity or the understanding, and the outcomes they have gotten pale in comparison to the amount of money and time and effort that has been spent. If those things cannot be achieved, it may be in the best interest to collapse the BIA. But at this moment, my suggestion would be modernize the bylaw, have a clear, articulated process for naming the board. We are 6 months in. 6 months in, there's no governance. There's no oversight of how $250,000 of taxpayer money is spent. That's a clear problem. There still continues to be confusion. So to answer your question directly, at this time, no, if we can bring transparency and accountability to the organization.
Okay, Councillor Huffman.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm glad you asked that question because I was a bit confused. So now that we've got that part clarified. So, Mr. Harris, do you own a business in downtown Simcoe?
No, I do not.
Okay. And Have you been on the BIA before?
I have not been on the BIA, but businesses have approached me to sit as their representative on the BIA, which is a common practice that has gone on for the last number of years.
Okay. So I believe Mayor Chop responded to an email last night on all of our behalves, and I think in regards to talking about the 6 months in, that we've only kind of got this information really in the past 2 weeks in terms of the issues with the board and stuff. So I don't think that really has any bearing on council or us being new or inexperienced or...
I think you misinterpreted what I said. 6 months into your term, you're willing to tackle hard issues. That's what I said.
Okay. Yes, I did misunderstand. That's clearly not what I heard. So what you would like to see, so when you're talking about the modernization, that's the part I don't understand. What are you talking about in terms of the modernization?
If you look at the bylaw as it stands, it doesn't seem to conform to the post-2010 amendments to the Act. The amendment to your bylaw specifically names 2 members that are no longer there. Question I kind of have is the members aren't there, is the bylaw even applicable, right? Because it specifically names that when you introduce these 2, this is the change. Well, if they've left, does that mean that change collapses? There's unclarity. The other thing is, you're 6 months in and you started this election process a number of months ago. We still today don't have a clear articulated process of how you move forward. If you look at the Act, the mechanism by which under the Act and in the BIA Handbook 2010 that spells out how a BIA board is supposed to be established is not a practice that this county follows. In talking to members of staff, they kind of did it to get along, and that's understandable, but under the requirements, it doesn't meet the requirements.
Okay, so the modernization you're talking about from the 2010 and then going forward, okay.
And, well, so what I would say specifically is in consultation with your staff, who are the experts here, I think that you should consult with them to make sure that the bylaw establishes to the common norms and practices that you would use to establish a bylaw. So it's not my expertise. I would consult with the expertise of your staff.
Okay. Mayor Chop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Harris. Can I assume that if we were to look at a potentially different process this year, since I think we all would agree that the way the names have come forward, it's certainly, there's no issue with any of the names that have come forward, but the manner in which that this has all been done, the process, sorry, thank you, took the words out of my mouth, that the process has failed. And so one thing we have discussed as a group is the possibility of, possibly reopening. We understand we need to move forward with this and we need to have it done within, let's say, the next month at the most. But having sort of a new nomination process and, really putting the fate in the hands of the business owners in Simcoe as to that decision as to who sits on that board. Is that something that somebody like yourself that's here advocating today, would that be something you would support?
Absolutely. I think what you have to do, so you look at Port Dover's Board of Trade. I think one thing that makes that work so well is the business community is highly invested in its success. You look here, there's been a large sense of disengagement. Part of that disengagement has come from the communication problems. Part of it's come from the process problems. Part of it's come from the lack of actual clear definitive victories by this organization. If you talk to businesses downtown, most of them don't even know they pay the levy. Some of them do. They don't know what the percentage is. They don't know how it works. If you try to get to a public meeting, it's impossible. If you try to ask what the BIA is doing, well, we can't tell you that. It's secret. Well, according to the Act, if you're following as a local board of council, there are strict rules that outline what goes into private session and what goes into public session. They're not adhering to those rules. I think in that sense, there's been a general discontent. At this moment, if your mandate is changed, then the mandate for change means being brave enough to tackle these hard issues, enabling people to have that engagement, and to your point specifically, you have to make a mechanism by which the business owners who pay the levy actually get a say in how it goes. I volunteered for the organization at one point. I did that to do it for a short term to help bring this change about, but in the long term, this is going to fall fully on the business owners downtown because they're the ones with skin in the game. They're the ones that are businesses down there. They're the ones that have to make this change. However, culturally, there has been a practice of being entrenched and having organizations that don't necessarily focus to the full extent that they should.
Additional questions? Don't see any. Okay, thank you. Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the deputation of Mr. John Harris regarding the Simcoe BIA bylaw? Councillor Michelle is the mover, seconder is Councillor Rabbits. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you for coming forward, expressing your concerns, Mr. Harris. And now we'll move to Ms. Brenda Lee Engelhardt regarding downtown Simcoe BIA report. Welcome. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Brenda Lee Engelhardt. I'm the Vice Chair of the Downtown Simcoe BIA. Our Chair, Jim Carroll, can't attend this evening because of a prior commitment to a committee that he chairs at First Baptist Church. I'm here tonight to present a report on the BIA's activities over the past year or so, with some references to initiatives reaching back to prior years of this board's term. I'm often asked, what is a BIA? My short answer is it's a geographic area in our municipality, not to be confused with the CBD. And then I was told, you better watch using that one. But it's within the Central Business District, with a board of management that's tasked with beautification and promotion of our downtown district. That's a pretty broad definition that gives local business people, property owners, and tenants an opportunity to join together and, with the support of the municipality, to organize, finance, and carry out physical improvements of municipally owned land and public spaces, and to promote economic development in our district. Our BIA was formed in the late 1970s. Currently, there are more than 300 BIAs in Ontario. Not all BIAs are located in downtown. Some are tourism districts, financial districts, industrial and repurposed manufacturing areas. Our BIA employs a full-time general manager and a part-time administrative assistant who carry out the work and directives of the BIA board in order to fulfill our mandate. The BIA office hosts the community policing office, public washrooms, the commissionaire's office, and we also warehouse our Christmas decor at this location. We also sublet to the Panorama Committee. Budgets for BIA activities are prepared by the BIA board and are presented to council for approval. Property owners within the BIA boundaries are assigned a levy that's paid with their property taxes. Some would compare it to common costs in a mall. This funding model reflects the principle that all who benefit should share some of the costs of a program of looking after the neighborhood. Although we are an arm's length entity, we are funded by monies collected by the municipality on our behalf, and as such, oversight by the municipality regarding budgets and board appointments are a necessity. So this is what we are doing. What have we been doing in the last while? Early in our term that commenced in 2015, the board recognized that the very foundational function of our downtown needed to be revisioned and repurposed to meet the increasing economic and societal pressures we faced. Changing demographics, consumer spending preferences at big box, smart center development along highway corridors, as well as the increase in online shopping, lack of affordable and available housing, an increase in addiction and mental health problems plaguing people in our community. These are issues beyond our scope of influence. Nevertheless, we are profoundly impacted by them. We also lost major traffic-generating businesses and destination shops like Bud's, the LCBO, the TD Bank, Helmo Jewelers, and other independent retail businesses that contributed to the unique offerings of our downtown. So we prioritized developing more effective relationships with the county and with the Chamber of Commerce to get buy-in on a revitalization agenda. It's hard to attract new investment as well as retain and support existing business if the environment is crappy. Who's going to throw good money after bad? The Norfolk Inn and the problems surrounding that property and other dwellings have plagued us for years. We directed staff to pursue this issue with a vengeance. The BIA facilitated initial discussions in support of the sale of the Norfolk Inn, and I can't thank the Inwell Corporation enough for their commitment to a project that assists and cares for the disadvantaged members in our community and also contributes to the stability of our downtown. The loss of major anchors and the resulting lack of daily traffic led to a sharp rise in vacant storefronts in the last 4 years. Two of the people who are sitting here, I think you do recall when I was here 4 years ago, and there was a commitment by your council to begin a revitalization review. Historically, our vacancy rate stood at about 10 to 12%, which is very much in line with stats reflecting a functional downtown commercial area. We petitioned to have the very generous vacancy rebate eliminated because we felt that owners of these vacant properties weren't being given sufficient incentive to fill their properties with tenants. While it wasn't totally removed, it was reduced, and we have experienced a reduction in vacancies in our downtown. Additional lobbying efforts at county have resulted in the development of a secondary plan for our downtowns in Norfolk. My understanding is this plan is midway in development and that we will be hearing more on this very important initiative soon that will help us help ourselves in developing vibrant, livable, and resilient business districts in our local communities. Downtowns have a historic connection to the origins of a community and have a symbolic significance in our civic life. They provide opportunities for local and incubator businesses to offer experiences not found in big box smart center areas. This existing infrastructure needs to be utilized effectively for business and leisure pursuits. Our efforts were also rewarded by working with county to obtain a substantial portion of OMAFRA Main Street's revitalization funding. One of the initiatives arising from this funding was the Win This Space program. And congratulations to Jess and Adam at Groundswell. This successful business incubator initiative has worked well in many communities, both urban and rural, and it often results in some program participants still deciding to open a business in the downtown. Our vacancy rate has dropped considerably, and I'd venture to guess that the vacancy rebate change plus the business incubator initiative have contributed to renewed interest in opening a business in our downtown. We have ongoing dialogue with county staff at the various departments that affect our BA, Public Works, Community Services, Planning, Economic Development, and I'm sure I forgot somebody. Garbage. This is a perennial problem. Businesses and people walking down the street on any given weekend were confronted with bags of garbage and other household items at the curbside. Businesses and tenants who weren't around on Mondays would put out their garbage on Friday or Saturday for a Tuesday morning pickup. Nice. We worked with county to adjust our downtown right to a pickup day to Wednesday, which has resulted in fewer complaints about garbage and has improved the curb appeal in our downtown. And recently, the old red garbage cans that the BIA purchased years ago have been replaced by new black iron garbage containers thanks to the OMAFRA funding. They look great, and I understand that this style of container may become consistent for all our downtowns. The BIA continues to pay a contractor to empty these garbage containers. We've streamlined pickup days according to need, and it saves a few bucks. Parkettes at the parking lots at Kent Street North and South, Colburn Street North, and Argyle Street have been looking very seedy of late. A work order with a private contractor is pending for next month that will clean up these spaces and make them more attractive. Parking. This is another perennial problem that's been around for all the years I've been on this board. In the old days, we had meters and lots of bylaw enforcement and lots of complaints from customers who were continually dinged if their meter lapsed. We took out the meters and went to the chalk marking model. We had less complaints, but it was a lot more labor intensive. Cutbacks in bylaw enforcement by Norfolk County led to less enforcement and a lot more abuse of parking spaces by business owners and their employees. Our customers couldn't find parking. Our board petitioned to implement our own enforcement with the Commissionaires program, and this worked better for us for a period of time, but it also created a financial liability for us. We petitioned to have bylaw take back parking enforcement, and I'm sure that parking will be on the agenda for a new BIA board. Our Commissioner, Ted Little, has retired, and we thank him for his service to our BIA. He has truly been a good ambassador for our downtown, keeping a watchful eye on the activities during the day. Other new pilot projects in our downtown were the street patios and the food trucks. We're told by revitalization gurus to try something new, so we did. These weren't major investments of BIA dollars, and the feedback is mixed, and the decisions about continuing with these programs and how they can be improved will be up to a new board. We are also a part of the organizing group that introduced an annual late summer event celebrating our farm workers. Good food and good music and a good beverage bring people together, and we anticipate that this event will continue to grow and attract our citizens and visitors to our downtown to celebrate the harvest. We continue to deliver our core annual advertising program with radio and print publications. Our drive-through art gallery campaign continues to celebrate some aspect of life in Simcoe and Norfolk. Last year, we honored the Panorama's 60th anniversary, and the banners created by our local citizens were charming. Tagging to the Christmas theme, we floated a little Christmas in July promotion. It's been successful in other BIAs. We've been asked by several retailers in the BIA to consider a bigger Christmas focus year-round, so we sent up a little test balloon. Another decision for a new board to make. This year, we are celebrating Norfolk's Gardens with our drive-through art gallery.
1 minute left, Brenda.
Okay. This project engages members of the community. So I want to talk money. I'm sorry, I may go one or two things. The BIA levy is not $250,000, it's $204,000 last year. We also, I want to clear up a misconception that our stakeholders pay 30% of the money collected by the county to the BIA. This percentage is incorrect. The BIA levy stands at 15%. Last year, our BIA budget didn't make it to the Finance Department in time to be included in the first quarterly installment issued for March. The amount was split in half and tacked onto the third and fourth installments, which probably gave our stakeholders a bit of a shock, and I truly apologize for that. And in hindsight, we should have informed our stakeholders of this occurrence, and I apologize to them for that. This year, I asked our GM to ask the county to split the projected BIA levy, which is slightly less. It's projected, it's provisional. I don't want that kind of situation to happen again. As for this year, we have an operating surplus of $6,782, which has been applied to our reserve account. Our lease is up at our current office space in August, and a decision will have to be made regarding a move to a location. A new board needs to revisit the VIA Bucks program and decide if it's still a viable promotional tool, or will some other loyalty program be appropriate for customers who support our downtown. Many operational decisions are pending, and a new board has to hit the ground running as soon as possible. A new board will have to make important decisions regarding staffing for the BIA immediately. At this time, I want to announce that our general manager, Mr. Jim McGimsey, tendered his resignation to us 2 weeks ago. It is truly a very unfortunate circumstance, and we are losing a dedicated, passionate advocate for our downtown.
Just about done, Brenda Lee?
I have a thing that goes in here. This is essentially what we did.
I'm going to.
And I want to, may I ask for an extension, because I want to address the issue of the...
There is no time extension, but I'll tell you what, if somebody asks a question, you can use the rest of your information to answer it, okay? That's what they do in Queen's Park and Parliament Hill. Okay, you're ready for questions. I'm going to go to Councillor Van Passen first.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, what do you have written on that other page?
There you go.
Okay,
Go
on
for
the
it.
next page. Yep. Which brings me to the next issue on the BIA's agenda. A new term of council triggers the appointment of a new BIA board. I've been on this board for over 20 years, and we have never had more applications than spots to fill. It's very gratifying to see the level of interest in downtown revitalization is generating. My thanks to this council for your commitment to addressing this very real and pressing issue about which so many of our Norfolk constituents feel so strongly. Having more applicants than board positions brings us all into uncharted territory. Who chooses who will sit on the BIA board? Unfortunately, I think I may have inadvertently imparted incorrect information regarding board representation last October when I attended a meeting of some concerned BIA business people. We are in the middle of a perfect storm of misinformation, misdirection, misunderstandings, miscommunications, mistrust, misapprehensions, everything. I want council and our BIA stakeholders to know that it was never this board's intention to exclude anyone from the selection process. Several weeks ago, we were informed by the clerk's office through our general manager that the application deadline had closed and we needed to make some choices. This was interpreted as the board needs to make these choices. 2 meetings later, the board reviewed and assessed all the applications with some selection criteria, and then each board member made their selections. A member from the outgoing board wanted to remain, and we felt that this was appropriate to provide some continuity, which left 6 positions. The first round filled 4 positions, and the second round filled the remaining 2 positions. With the interests of the BIA top of mind, we felt that these selections provided a good balance of new established businesses, a good service and retail mix, a gender mix, a culture and tech balance, which are emerging enterprises in our downtown. There were fresh eyes and seasoned eyes with a history of service to our community in their past volunteer commitments. Clearly, the wheels fell off the bus, and a lack of clarity about this process has led to this limbo. Clearly, our BIA bylaw and procedures need an update, and this process takes time. And our BIA needs feet on the ground to move forward with our daily business. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the outgoing BIA board for their service to their fellow BIA members. New energies are needed to carry on with revitalization efforts, and I look forward to making myself available to any new board member who needs the backstory on our efforts over the last 20 years, if it will help pave the road faster to a vibrant, livable, and prosperous downtown.
Thank you. Now you're ready for more questions.
Thank you.
And if we could get a copy of your lengthy deputation speech there to the clerk when you have time, not right away.
Yep.
Okay, I did see some hands up. Okay, one was Van Passen. Questions for the deputation? Councillor Taylor.
You heard with the last deputation that new process, something like an election, putting the board selection back into the hands of the business owners, something that we've been considering or have considered. What does that look like to you as a business owner in the downtown?
Well, you know, I mean, in theory, this looks wonderful, and I would love, you know, that would happen. But when you look at who all of the stakeholders are in the BIA, it's very unclear, from what I understand, in terms of who has the voting power. You have the person, the property owner who pays the levy, so they are considered to be stakeholders. And then the business is considered to be a stakeholder. So how do you assign that vote? And how do you assign that to people who are absentee people in, you know, who have investment in properties here? And some leases, they assign the BIA levy forward to the business owner, and some they don't. Like, this is the kind of, I think it would be better for us to take the time to research what other successful BIAs do and how they do it. Like, there was no intent on our part to keep anyone away from our table. That is patently untrue. We welcome anyone who comes to the table. I mean, seriously. This is, you know, we do a lot of stuff, and we want people to be involved, you know, but we're also full-time business people.
Okay, Councillor Taylor, anything else? No? Mayor Chop?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to the deputation. You know, this council is very thankful for all the work that you've done and so on. But I mean, you speak of misinformation. I just want to correct something right now, because it has already been acknowledged by one of the councillors at this table that the first list that was provided was created with the councillor and with the hired employee of the board. And that is the information that has circulated to the members of the BIA. And that is where we've seen this breakdown in process. So I think it's important to at least acknowledge that that did occur, and it's as a result of that that we are feeling this pushback. So The intention now is to correct something that it's unfortunate that it happened, and I think everybody wishes that if they could go back, it wouldn't have happened that way, there's no doubt about it. But we can't change the fact that it has happened.
Yes.
And so now it's just up to us to kind of come up with a new solution to ensure that engagement and buy-in from all of the members, because as you heard, some of your other fellow BIA members that are here tonight, there are people that have lost trust. And
I
so it's
understand
our
that.
job to get it back and to build back a strong BIA again.
And I want to answer Mayor Chop that I understood that this was what had happened. And when I realized the full implications of that, that's when I withdrew my support of that list. And I asked for the applications to be circulated to all the board members. And I asked for all the board members to meet again and I also listened to our board members because I remember, to our public, a podcast was mentioned from the hub. And I thought, well, okay, I'm going to listen to this. So I listened to it, and I heard Dustin Wakeford and John Harris and Adam Berry and Dave Scott, and they were having discussions about downtown issues. And, some of it was tough to hear. I certainly remember being very critical myself 20 years ago. But there was a lot of information that they didn't have about things that we had done or so on. So I thought, and they were very, Dustin was very passionate about policing issues and the drug issues, and they have a property downtown. So, I felt, okay, let's open this process up again and be more transparent to that and make the decisions that we felt would reflect and that would serve the BIA best. So that's what we did.
I think, I think we can all sympathize with you on, that everybody has a different viewpoint, and we've all learned that in politics recently, that's for sure. So I sympathize that, you can't always please everybody, and you are there volunteering your time and doing this, and I also appreciate the fact that you went back and tried to correct the wrong. The problem is sometimes it's already spun to a point of maybe not being so easily corrected. So I think we've come up with a solution that we're going to present today. And
I hope so.
Again, there's nothing against any member that's on the list. It's just the process and it's the way that it happened. And maybe we'll kind of put the power back. And I appreciate your comments on in terms of the clarity around who the stakeholders are if we were to do an election process.
I think that's a very important point that we have to make sure that that's very, very clear. And I mean, if when we got these things, we would have been said, okay, take this and let's go and have an election, then we would have had an election. Although we'd never gone through that process ever before. And so it would have been problematic for us to be able to reach out to the stakeholders that make that decision. And then we would have to create the process of the members, the people who stepped forward and put forth their applications to speak to the members. Like, how do you do that? Like, it would be like you going forward and talking to people. Like, in the meantime, what do we do? What do we do in the meantime until this process is finished?
Councillor Taylor again.
Thank you, Chair Columbus. Through you, as stated today with the new attempt or a new focus on the procedure, it's going to take some time. Realistically, as an outgoing member of the board, how quickly does this need to be done? Ideally, it's going to happen today, but we know that's not the case. There has to be a bit of time yet. My goal would be to aim for a month for a new process to be completed. Aim for a month. Is that realistic?
If it could be a month, then I would say let's do it. We'll struggle through until that time. We don't do the patio pilot. We don't do whatever, but I have made assurance, that effect to that the levy amounts are quarterly, so there's not the shock to our membership. So, I'm fine with that, and it is up to a new BIA to decide. But it would be great if somebody could help us to start to find a new place, because we got to be out of there by early August. So, there are a few things that are very urgent. And, we didn't, as the outgoing board, we didn't want to saddle a new board with decisions that they may not want. And there may be radical differences in what they decide to do. Like they may decide to, cut back on this, cut back on that, like whatever you're going to do. That's fine. Do what you feel is appropriate for the BIA. But to completely remove the BIA legislatively, I think is very unwise. You can collapse it to be quite minimal. But I think, you're getting really good value for your dollar here. If you saw the numbers and actually compared, what we pay in salaries and the level of work that's paid out for that, and our advertising reach out and so on, I mean, this is, you get good value. And our private contractors and so on, we did have county doing that work for us years ago. It cost us like 30% more than what it's costing us now. So, we have done every effort we can to streamline what we were asked to do.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead, one more.
Just a quick comment, and we do thank you guys for everything you have done. And I do want to just say I don't think that the discussion around this table right today is removing the BIA by any means. That certainly I don't think that's around.
Thank you. And I welcome new people and fresh ideas. Like, it's been over 20 years that I've been on this board, and that's enough. It's time for the younger ones to step up and make the downtown their own, and put their stamp on it.
Anybody else? I have one question, Brenda Lee.
Yes.
Will you be replacing the general manager position?
Well, this is the thing. If it's going to be a month, we can't. Like, we don't want to do that. This is a new board. You may decide to do a part-time promotions and part-time administrative, and instead of lumping everything together into one position. It may work more effectively for you. But these are decisions that a new board has to make.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I need a mover and a seconder to receive the deputation of Brenda Lee Engelhardt regarding the Simcoe BIA, moved by Councillor Taylor, seconded by Mayor Chop. Those in favor? Thank you for coming forward and all the work you've done in the past for the BIA, Ms. Engelhardt. Where do we take this now? Mayor Chop, I see I've got a note here that.
Thank you, Chair. Well, everybody, per Council's direction last week, Councillors Taylor and Rabbits and myself and our CAO and clerk met last week to toss around some ideas and see how we might be able to move forward with this. So on everybody's desk is a motion that was prepared. But I'm just going to, after listening to both of the deputations this evening, make a couple of amendments to that. So that the county clerk be directed to present amendments to the Simcoe Business Improvement Area bylaw with the intent of modernizing the existing bylaw to ensure proper oversight, accountability, and transparency of the BIA, and establish dates when audited financial statements must come forward to council, and that the county clerk be directed to assist the BIA in taking nominations for a new board of BIA directors, clarifying who the eligible voting stakeholders are, and holding an election of BIA directors by a ballot process, and further that council shall support and approve the BIA membership as appointed by a majority vote of the business owners in the district, and that this new process be properly communicated to all BIA stakeholders.
Did you get that, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's one thing I just would like clarification on. Sorry, just bear with me here. Okay, and it was the second one, and that the county clerk be directed to assist the Simcoe BIA in taking nominations for a new board of BIA directors, clarifying who eligible stakeholders are. Is that correct?
Who the eligible voting stakeholders are.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
So if I could just speak to this really quickly. So the idea with this is that we hold an election, we take new nominations, and because of the breakdown in process that has occurred, again, there is no concerns with any names that are on the list. I hope that they all put their name back in again, and that we properly put the decision of the board as a result of the breakdown in process to an election by the BIA members themselves.
And Madam Mayor, this is for spot on the BIA for till 2022. Should that be in here? It's four-year term, right? We don't want election. Okay. Yeah. So be full term. Any more discussion with respect to the motion? Councillor Taylor?
I'd like to second that, so we can have the discussion. And then if I could offer an amendment that all applications that have been received to this point, their name is in. I think it's redundant for them to have to fill another application out. I think their names should just carry over.
Any comment about that, Madam Mayor?
I thought we had discussed that the other day, but
Okay. Just clarify that for some people that are listening.
Like their application has been.
I think that we were just going to change. I thought the suggestion from the clerk was that he was just going to simplify it so that it wasn't a full application process. That
Never mind. I do remember that.
The deputy clerk will speak
I'm
to it.
going to withdraw that. Actually,
Okay.
I do remember
Go ahead
that.
and speak to it, Madam Clerk.
I think we're okay, and the clerk can work with both yourself and Councillor Rabbits to figure out what that nomination form looks like, and the outgoing board as well.
Okay.
I guess the only other piece would be on this, sorry, Mr. Chair, would just be to put a timeline on this. So I'm thinking this will be ratified at council next week. So we should have a plan and process then. We could open the nomination period up for, let's say, a 2-week period, and the election being a 2-week period to drop off your ballot cards. So we should be able to have it done within a month.
Okay. Any other clarifications required? Councillor Taylor?
As the motion reads that council will support and approve the BIA membership as appointed by the majority of business owners in the district, can we also include in there that direct communication, as soon as that is established and the winners are known, it is just communicated to the public we don't need that final approval of council. We can just put the names out there. And
Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, so what we would do is as soon as, because council needs to ratify what the BIA does, but we would do that in closed session, and we would come out and present it in open session. So publicly it would be announced, and then the staff within council services would notify yourself and Councillor Rabbits as the representatives on the Simcoe BIA, and whichever volunteers could assist in getting that process out.
thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to ask the clerk to read the whole recommendation that has been moved by Mayor Chop and seconded by Councillor Taylor. Clerk?
The motion as follows, through the chair, is that the county clerk be directed to present amendments to the Simcoe Business Improvement Area bylaw with the intent of modernizing the existing bylaw to ensure proper oversight, accountability, and transparency of the BIA, and establish dates when audited financial statements must come forward to council, and that the county clerk be directed to assist the Simcoe BIA in taking nominations for a new board of BIA directors, clarifying who the eligible voting stakeholders are, and holding of an election for BIA directors by a ballot process. And further, that council shall support and approve the BIA membership as appointed by majority vote of the business owners in the district. And further, that this new process be properly communicated to all BIA stakeholders. And further, that the amended bylaw and appointments be presented to council on June 11th, 2019.
Mr. Taylor?
Should we establish a two-year out term and then also a 4-year term, so they're alternating? They are all 4-year terms, but we have every 2 years another election taking place, just to help with continuity, and hopefully something like this doesn't happen again where we are boardless for 6 months.
Well, okay, you got that on the floor. Let's hear some comments back, or is it just complicate things? Don't see anybody chiming in on your suggestion. Mayor Chop?
I think it's just kind of important to get rolling with this, and I think that maybe that should be something that the new board should look at. So once the board is created, perhaps you guys will be able to vote amongst yourselves, whether that becomes a draw of, a couple people then having a 3-year term or something that you can balance out. But I think there's different ways that you could look at doing this once an actual board is selected versus now having to vote on who's going to be the 2-year appointee and who's going to be the 4-year appointee. I think that just becomes complicated in a situation that's already too complicated.
Okay. You have raised a good point, however, but I think it's getting complicated. Councilor Van Passen?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. From some of the discussion I heard, I guess has in the past been standard practice for a business owner to appoint a designate. That might be the business operator, or like in the motion it talks about business owners, right? As ballots from the business owners. Can it be their business owner or their designate? Does that make sense in the process?
Mayor Chop, you've got the answer?
I would be fine with the business owner or their designate. Just to provide further clarification, though, we did mention clarifying who the eligible voting stakeholders are. So to me, that could also fit within that. It could be the business owner or their designate.
Okay, so is that understood? That's in the one paragraph where it says vote of a business owners or designate in the district, right? Okay, everybody understand that? Okay, ready to call the vote? Those in favor? No one opposed. That's great. Thank you. Carried. Our next deputation is with respect to the Port Dover Senior Center, and we have Adam Berry here from Port Dover, Ontario. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you for clarifying the province that I am from.
You have 10 minutes, sir.
All right. So we're going to hear a staff report from Mr. Cridlin in a minute. What I wanted to do was sort of give you some information on some of the background work that I've done on the senior center, just so when Bill presents, there's some context for the work that's, like I said, been done. So I started meeting with seniors in Port Dover who wanted to put a senior center together in November of 2018. We've met at the Lighthouse Theater a couple times in medium to large groups, 60 to 70 people, give or take. And just to collect feedback. So from there, I put together just a survey. I posted this on the Currently in Port Dover Facebook page, and then also I sent it out to people who had joined a mailing list from those meetings. It's about 80 people, give or take. So the results that came back in, just to show the interest in the senior center. First question, it says question 2. Question 1 was just please provide your name and address. So it's not in here because I told them I'd keep it private, but just giving you context, that's why question 1 is missing. If I need to verify that these are real people that filled this out, I can. In any case, question 2 was just about the ages of people that were coming to the meetings and said that they would use the center. I decided that 55 was our cutoff for senior. I don't know if according to Hoyle that's correct, but anyways, you can see a range from people from 55 up to 85 plus that have expressed an interest. I had 271 complete the survey, by the way. And within that 271, some people completed it as a couple, which is adorable, but doesn't give a full sense of the amount of people. Like, there's actually more people than this. But in any case, 271 were completed. So what, I've gone on now, this is just the ages. If you can go, Pam, to the next chart there. Keep going. Thank you. So again, we sampled just the range of activity that they would like to participate in. They're pretty evenly distributed, as you can see, but the categories that I gave them were to choose from were opportunities just to casually hang out, light fitness groups or classes, schedule recreation, speakers and information, volunteer opportunities. I'll just draw your attention to the other. There was quite a few other suggestions, but they were all really suggestions within those. So if they didn't say recreation, they may have responded, I want art classes. Well, okay, 6 and 1. Like that's within the larger category. But anyways, you can see there's a fairly broad interest in what seniors would like to do at this center. So I think that bodes well for people who will come as long as the programming is satisfactory. Pam, if you could go on, please. This one I would just as soon not include because of the presentation that you're going to hear from Bill in a minute. But when I was asking for locations, it was identified that people would prefer the community center. We've moved on from that, but wanted to include it anyway so there wasn't stuff missing. Okay, so this is where we start to get important stuff, I think. I've asked people what they'd be willing to pay in order to support the viability of Senior Center in terms of an annual fee. In Simcoe and in Delhi Senior Centers, there is an annual fee. I believe that Simcoe's is 40, and I think Delhi's is 40 or 50. So we're in that neighborhood. As you can see, the two most commonly given answers were 50, and then second place was 100. We blew right past everything between 50 and 100, right up to 100. So that's nice. In any case, we can see that probably we can charge our seniors around $50 a year to be a member of this thing. So if you do the 300-ish people that have expressed an interest times the $50, you can see that we're going to have some hopefully some revenue to cover some of the expenses that Bill will get to in a moment. Next. So just a matter of interest, how often do you believe you would come? So clearly once or twice a week was the most commonly given, but 5 or more times did receive some responses. And then of course we're in the middle with a little bit more balanced usage. A lot of the feedback on these things is, well, it'll depend on the programming. Fair enough. But anyways, this is the sort of interest that we see. Pam, if you can go on. This is statistically useless other than just a point of information is how many people do you think are out there? And I just wanted to get a sense of what the chatter was about. So again, we can see that people believe that there are at least 100 or 200 people that want to use this. I realize that that won't pass any kind of test, but again, I just wanted to show like what their peers are saying. And yeah, I would go. So we see that there is some interest beyond the people that were sitting at the meetings. This is my favorite one, I think, or actually the next one's my favorite, but this is important too. Will you help us? As you can see, I have 191 potential volunteers who have expressed an interest in helping offset some of the costs by chipping in. I think in 2019, being able to get 191 people to even express an interest in volunteering in something is remarkable. I realize that they're not all going to show up, but if we get 10%, that's more than enough to make this thing go. The last one is, this is my favorite slide. It tells you what they were willing to volunteer to do. So I asked them, would you be willing to be a member of a steering committee? Would you help us open and close if we gave you keys? Will you help us fundraise? And then the other. And in the other is where I got my good answers. In the other, they said that they would be happy to help with maintenance. They would help with management, program facilitation, leadership, administration. Some people just want to make coffee. We'll coordinate group excursions. We'll work at reception. We'll set up and take down chairs. But most importantly, we have people that are willing to drive around and pick up other seniors who are unable to get to the center on their own. And I think that is remarkable. Those are my statistics. Bill has the information on sort of the proposal of where we'd like to do this. I just wanted to give you context. Like I said, if there's any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions? Madam Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Adam, for coming.
You're welcome, Madam Mayor.
So, I mean, I don't think it's any secret. Adam and I are friends, but
I didn't know that.
I got to give you the gears here a little bit.
Please do.
Because you heard a lot with the BIA just now about process and the trouble that we seem to have gotten in because process hasn't, been followed. And I'm just wondering, in fact, it was here at this council meeting that I had asked staff back on January 18th, I believe it was, for them to reach out and contact
Yes.
you to work on the senior center. The concerns that I have right now is Councillor Martin specifically requested to be involved in these meetings as the ward councillor. And I'm just wondering if you've managed to get a report, and sometimes I can't even get a report. So I'm just wondering if maybe you might be able to kind of find a way, like if you could explain to me why the ward councillor wouldn't have been involved kind of in helping to prepare this report that you worked on.
I don't know because I didn't prepare the report.
Okay.
So historically speaking, when I've done things in the community that have involved staff and council, I haven't gone through a ward council. I've just talked to staff and I followed the same that I've done all along.
I just think, I just hope that moving forward, as we move forward with this project, that, you do have a new council that's enthusiastic in each of their wards, and that, just like the BIA, I hope is, going to work with council, the new BIA, and Councillor Rabbits and Councillor Taylor's working group and so on, that we have to kind of break down these silos a little bit. And the way that I feel from this report coming forward, we all want to see a senior center in Port Dover. But I question the process of how this kind of division, when the Board of Trade, I hope, will work with council moving forward on this project.
So to answer that though, this isn't a Board of Trade project.
Okay, well then yourself on an individual. I mean, you have a member here that is, enthusiastic to help out and work on this project. And it was a little bit of a surprise anyway to myself to see this, knowing that we had reached out and asked to be included in those meetings and never were.
Okay, well, if the direction then is to, I don't know what the direction is. The direction then to not do projects without council input? Like, I don't know where we're going with this.
No, I just hope that, we can all maybe find a way of working together to move this project forward.
I think you got the message, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Right. Okay. Councillor Rabbits?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Adam. Adam, thank you for your presentation today. My question is less a question for you, but more of a question for your partners in this endeavor. I do see that our staff report is making explicit reference to the Port Dover Kinsman Club and the Scouting Association. I see the Scouts are here, but they're not hard to spot because they are in uniform. But I was wondering, you weren't speaking to the staff report because you don't want to steal any of Bill's thunder, but I wanted to provide maybe an opportunity for you or the other stakeholders that are involved to maybe make a comment on either your presentation or the staff report to come. I don't know if we've allowed a spot for them to include any of their commentary. I know they were consulted. We happen to have our scouts in attendance today, and I just wanted maybe to offer an opportunity if they wanted to have a few words, whether that be in support or maybe if they had any reservations about the information as presented.
If they want to come, if somebody, Jenny, you want to come up? Or no? They've sent a letter. They've added a letter as correspondence, but yeah, I'm happy to have them up here, sure.
If they just came to Wallflower, that's fine too. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Okay.
There's the clerk just whispered to me if the Scout group representative would like to share the podium with Adam, that's permissible. Okay, if you'd like. Okay. Anybody have any questions for the Scout?
Yeah, come on up, man.
No?
Any questions, I guess? I think about the only statement that I can make is that we were kind of blindsided as Scout organization, and I'll again leave that up to Bill. We're in favor of a senior center in Port Dover, and we'd be quite willing to work with the seniors. But the active word is work with, not find out 4 or 5 days before it's coming before council. So unless other people have anything to ask me, so I'm just going to leave it at that.
That's a good thing you came to the podium. That's pretty important.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Mayor
Well, I just received a message from another Scout earlier in the break. I think I was telling you. So I just want to clarify again that the consultation that it spoke of in here is not the consult. You didn't feel that was the proper consultation. Okay. And the other question I have is, was it suggested then that you were to move to the community center, or were you going to be able to continue to share the facility?
My understanding from the report was we would share the facility with the senior center.
Okay, thank you.
Just so that people don't misunderstand that I'm a new scouter, between my wife and I, we have 61 years of scouting in Port Dover. We have been there since 1988, so we do have a vested interest in this scouting, and let's just say I'm well beyond the 55 age, so I'm also a senior by almost 15 years. But we would like to continue a discussion with the BIA and also with the seniors, but we want to be part of the process, not the end result.
Okay, thank you for that. Can we have your name, sir?
Brian Elder?
So can I speak to that, just the comment about the late, am I allowed to just address that or no?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so we've had members of the Scouts attending the senior center meetings, and I'm not putting it on them that they should have, I'm not saying anybody should have, but my understanding was that we were sort of going forward and that this was going back and forth. So if that wasn't the case, fair enough. I will take full responsibility for that not being communicated to them sooner. And on that note, so we've been meeting back and forth with Bill and his staff as well, and I was sort of directed, and Bill decided, and we all decided that we weren't going to make a big announcement that, hey, we're working on the Scout Hut, until it was ready to come to council, and it was only ready to come to council last week, and as soon as that happened, we asked the Scouts if they would be able to offer that support. So it was sort of just the way things sort of dovetailed out. That was it. It wasn't that we were going to keep the Scouts in the dark until the final hour. It's just the way she goes sometimes.
Councillor Martin.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Adam, for your deputation and all the work you're doing on this project. I think this is obviously very well needed in our community. To kind of echo some of Mayor Chop's comments, I think it's important today to provide some context to the people who are sitting here and as well to you, Adam, so you're in full understanding. I too reached out to staff and asked to be involved on this project, and I was told the meetings were canceled, and that was the last I heard of it. So not to place any blame, but I certainly am in support of this initiative, and I'm keen to help you and the members in any way, shape, or form moving forward. So thank you again for sharing the information.
Okay.
Councillor Huffman.
I mean, what the heck? Why not go 3 for 3 this week? I don't think some of the comments that have been made are appropriate. This is a deputation. Obviously, there's some other issues that are going on. I feel that half of us are probably privy to half of the conversations. And so let's just focus on the report. So you have a report, you worked with staff.
Yes.
There's the possibility, and like I said, I'm unsure as to what the Scouts were alluding about. I don't know. So I'm a little confused right now, but that appears to be nothing new sitting around here.
Okay, Hubby, we received...
I have a question.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, I do.
Go for it.
So my question is, when you were looking at locations, there were 2 that you had, correct?
No. So I didn't start with any necessarily locations. It was during the meetings with the seniors at the Lighthouse. We had them at the theater there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, where would you most like to see this? And the answer that came up most was the community center.
Okay.
And there were some other suggestions too, that this hall, that hall, like pretty much every building in Port Dover was suggested, just about every church, the theater itself, Lions, whatever, everywhere. But the one that kept coming back, so rather than say, here are 10 options, pick one, I'd more just ask them to say, are we aiming towards the community center or not? Because my goal was to have a partnership with the county.
Okay.
And so I wanted to, if possible, to use a municipal facility in the same way that Simcoe and Delhi has a partnership with Norfolk County. I felt like that was an important thing to do for a number of reasons, grants and things like this, and also maintenance and support and snow removal and all these other things that can become
that are already in place.
That's right. It can become extremely onerous to an outside group to continue to fund these things.
Okay, and I just wanted to, in terms of the cost piece, and you had said about the $50 mark.
Yes.
And then, so I was looking at the $100 mark, which I don't really think is ridiculous. I mean, that works out to like $8.34 a month.
Yeah, I was.
So, I mean, I think there would be some options. I wouldn't want to see anybody shut the door on capping what that could be and look at possibly more of a sliding scale. So,
I agree with you. I guess I was mostly going on what the other senior centers are paying and trying
Yeah.
to go along, because I don't want to start to put in a situation where ours is, if it's a little more, fair enough, but to double.
yeah, not saying
That's all,
everyone
yeah.
had to. I just
Yep.
think that there's some more
No, and
options instead
with,
of just capping.
you're right, and within the responses, there's some people that said, oh, I'd gladly pay $200 a year, I'd gladly pay $250 a year.
Then they can. And other people can pay 50.
And so what they've also, that's right, and what they've also, some people have also said that they'd be willing to pay extra for some programming. So if it was a pay what you can concert or what have you, then there might be other ways to generate revenue. And so the other part of this thing about why I'm here now and why I was I don't want to say aggressive, but certainly pushing to move this thing along was that I do have a grant application out to the Ontario Trillium Foundation for programming, and I felt like if we could get a building in the mix, that would help me get that much needed funding rather than to have to go back to the county later and say, well, we need money for programming. But the thing is, I feel like if we could tell the province we have a building to have the programming in, that will help get the programming funding. So that's why I'm sort of moving things along a little quickly.
Okay. Councillor Martin, then Van Pass.
Nope.
Do you think, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the deputation, do you think a letter of support from the county would assist in your application, or are you already passed?
No, I think that if we have it settled, so again, this is the tough thing about doing a deputation before the staff report. Within the staff report, it's going to indicate that what we're looking for is just an agreement from the county to pursue further talks to come up with an agreement between the seniors group and the scouts to use the facility. That's what we're trying to get done today, is that the county says, yes, we support this going forward. And I think that if that decision is made, that will be enough to say to the Trillium, oh, by the way, we have an agreement to get a building. This would be great if we could now fill it with joyous programming.
Councillor Van Pass.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have one question, because I need to know Mr. Very Secret, because, we talked about process. You got this great idea, you do a lot of work on it, but you don't have to involve the local council or the local councillor. You just go to staff and spend staff resources and time and taxpayer money to get a report done. I can't even get that done. I need council approval to direct staff to bring a 4-page report here. But members of the public can just do it out of the whim and say, I need this really quickly. So I want to know what your secret is.
I'm a magical kind of guy.
Okay, no further questions. I need a mover and a seconder to receive the deputation. Mr. Adam Berry, Councillor Martin, mover. Seconder, Councillor Rabbits, that we receive the deputation of Mr. Adam Berry regarding the Port Dover Senior Center.
Thank you.
Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Berry. And now we'll go to Mr. Cridlin to provide us with the details of the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To County Council, staff report CS 1918 is presented to Council tonight, and what staff are asking Council is that they authorize staff to enter into an agreement with the Port Dover Seniors Club. The county presently has involvement with the Simcoe, Delhi, and somewhat limited Waterford and St. Williams clubs. So it's kind of a service or the programming that we are involved with. The long and short of is the club, when Adam came to us, they need a 911 location basically to move ahead with grant funding. As he had mentioned, they were thinking of the community center. However, the community center is one of the most utilized facilities we have. So we ran into a problem. We'd have to cancel. Also, this club would like to leave certain things set up at night. So we threw out the idea of the Scout Club. Looking at it, it's not a perfect area by all means. It's one floor. However, there is some accessibility issues with the washrooms. So I think in our talks, it was never to be seen as their future home. It was to be seen as a startup for them. I think the report talks about the Scout Hut and its limited rentals, and staff thought it was a great idea to utilize this facility. Staff have worked out a possible agreement money-wise, but as Mr. Berry said, there's still a lot of details that need to go into this agreement. There's been a lot of talk on the floor about how we got to this point. I think for community services staff, I mean, we work with community groups like this, and then maybe it was the chicken egg thing. We do have to have council involved with this at some point, so we needed Mr. Berry and his group to get a little farther along in their process before we brought the report. And tonight is when we brought it for future discussion. So with that, I'll turn it over to Norfolk County Council for any questions they may have.
Questions to Mr. Cridley? Councillor Hopper.
Thank you, Chairman Columbus, through you to Mr. Cridlin. Going through the report, I mean, obviously, it makes sense that we help provide these services in our community. I guess my question is, I was a little concerned about the amount of funding that's dispersed amongst all of our seniors centers. And I think the Waterford and Victoria one are, is it